Oh, wait. What's going on? Okay, there you go. Let me wait for it to go live on YouTube.
It goes live straight away.
Oh, it does? Okay. Yeah, I'm an idiot. All right. What a great way to start. Welcome to another episode of Professional Novice. My name is Ali Rizvi, and oh, God, okay. You know what? Let me start this again. Oops. I got to mute this. Okay, now we're good. Hold on. Welcome to another episode of Professional Novice with I'm Ali Rizvi, and this is basically a podcast that I started during the COVID era when all of us are home and I don't get to see my friends a lot. So just to meet up with my friends, hang out with them, sit and talk to them about the issues of the day or not. So it's the podcast where we call in experts and we talk about everything beyond their expertise. So it's going to be fun. Today, joined by my good friend, Haris Sultan. Haris Sultan, how are you? How's it going?
I'm great. I'm glad to be with you again.
I think I started that too formally. Yeah, it doesn't feel that way. I'm trying to force myself to be formal, but I'm seeing you, and
you get a hang of it.
Yeah, we had Whoppers together at Burger King in Amsterdam. So I don't know. This feels. But how's it going? How's it going in isolation, COVID? Are you guys still staying at home? Are you going out?
No, it's going great. I mean, it didn't really hit me as much because I've been working from home for quite a long time now, probably about 4 years now. Mm-hmm. So like to me, I wake up whenever I want. I take naps during the day, and do whatever I want. It's always been the same. But one thing I did notice that. But what that included was that you can do whatever you want whenever you want. But then now restrictions have eased a little bit. But then I realized, now I'm not allowed to go anywhere. So that's when it hits you, even though you are not going anywhere anyway. But when you're actually told you can't go anywhere, that's when it hits you. Oh, okay. But no, I think it's been okay. I mean, it's pretty easy going for me.
Yeah, it's the option thing. It's like being in a relationship. You're happily there. You're like, okay, that's good. But then someone tells you, yeah, no, you have to stick together. Like, oh my God.
Well, yeah.
Well, no, that's obviously not from personal experience. But anyway, so I'm going to just tell everybody who doesn't really know you about, I don't know who doesn't, but Haris is a Pakistani Australian atheist activist, and he's the author of The Curse of God, Why I Left Islam, a fantastic book that I had the privilege of being able to write the foreword to. He has a YouTube channel called Pakistani Mulhid. That means Pakistani atheist, I guess. Mulhid is a word for atheist.
Yeah.
Which promotes atheism, secularism, science, skeptical thinking, and so on in Urdu. Right? Urdu is the language that's spoken in Pakistan. And he has tens of thousands of subscribers. I mean, this thing has really, really taken off. And the number of views, I mean, the people who watch it, who know about it, is probably even wider.
A million a month. We're hitting
a million a month.
Yeah,
people watching an Urdu podcast about atheism. He is able to do this, and one of the reasons I thought of this topic to really get him to talk, not necessarily about him. He talks a lot about the actual content of the work, but to just talk about online activism. Because Haris, you are Pakistani Australian, you're in Australia, but you're able to say things and reach a huge Pakistani audience and speak openly about things that atheists in Pakistan can't do, right? They can't really talk about it.
That's the beauty of online activism. We can really, really spread out ideas. I mean, prophets would have loved it. They had to get stoned and they had to migrate, get kicked out of cities, but here we are in the 21st century. Now we just turn on our laptops and communicate with hundreds of thousands of people. There's some videos that have gone absolutely viral. As I said, we've been hitting 1 million views a month consistently for the last 3 months. And it's been going up and up. And it's so powerful. It's so powerful. Someone sent me a video from his masjid. As you know, there was Eid festival not long ago, probably a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week ago.
Yeah, end of Ramadan.
Yeah, and one of my followers, he went to a mosque, obviously, because you've got to go to mosque even if you are an atheist, but there's social pressure and stigma and whatnot. And he sent me a clip from his mosque where the imam was. He said this is the first time he's ever heard his imam talk about anything other than crapping on other sects. He spent his entire khutbah, the sermon, on dissing atheists. So,
I think I saw it. Did you post a clip from that somewhere?
I think I might have posted it somewhere, but there were actually, I think there were 2 clips that actually went up. One was actually sent to me by my very own follower, and I was like, wow, there is this raging debate. Now all of a sudden they're like, whoa, we gotta join our ranks together. The Barelvis and Deobandis and Alihadis and Salafis and Wahhabis and Shias. We got to join our forces against this new menace that is atheism. And it's resonating so immensely and so quickly that they have no answers. They're shutting people down. One of my followers was actually arrested. They took his laptop and they found my book in his hard drive as one of the evidence that he was an atheist and blasphemer. But he said what he had to say to get out. He eventually got out, and that's why I keep telling them that yes, we are taking a little bit of a risk. But as I've always said, that I'm quite lucky that I'm in my house in Australia. Nobody knows where I am, and even if I go out, I go out. There's no immediate risk on my life. But if you are in Pakistan, even listening to my words could be problematic, not necessarily by the active witch hunt by the government, but there's still always there are agencies involved who, if are reported, then they have to take an action. But there are just so many now. The numbers are growing so rapidly that they have no answer. I would, what I always wanted to, I always felt that, and I don't know if I've spoken with you privately or not. I mean, I've always been fascinated by people who do something in their life, the limited amount of time that they get, 50, 60 years of life, and then they leave such a big footprint that for generations to come, people just look at it and they have somehow contributed in changing the world, just ever so little. But then that just becomes a snowball effect. So I was the first Urdu YouTuber who was actively criticizing religion, targeting mainly Islam. And then within, I think it's been 1.5 years since I started that. And before that, obviously, a lot of other great people have been doing that on the English front. And so we have somehow, ex-Muslim activist community globally have somehow left an imprint. But this idea was still very foreign to people in Pakistan or India or ex-Muslims, who just cannot understand or have no interest in listening to, apostate prophet or Amin Nawabi or Ali Rizvi. So all these things, as good as they are, were not still resonating with these people. So, and for example, Sharif Gaber, who mainly produces content in Arabic, he left such a huge imprint in the Arabic world that we know what trouble he's in, and hopefully I don't know. I don't have any updates, but I'll hope he'll come out. But why not do that in Urdu? So in 2019, I started this. Very humble beginnings. I managed to get a couple of big names. One really big name, movie star, that helped me. That helped me promote the channel. But slowly, other people started coming out. Now, Spartacus is another guy. He's got 65,000 subscribers now. Very different approach to my approach.
And his is also in Urdu?
Yeah, his is also in Urdu. His is also in Urdu, 65,000 subscribers, hitting regularly well over 1 million views a month. Another guy came out, Ghalib Kamal. Now, that guy is an intellectual powerhouse. His grasp on history, on Christianity and Islam is, and even philosophy is just mind-boggling. Again, very different style from my style. I think he's got something like 20,000 subscribers now. It's growing. And then because my videos, I designed my format that I wanted to constantly put content out. So I thought, okay, I'm going to put out one video a day I'm just going to bombard them with so many ideas that how many response videos are they going to create? So many people
Right.
came, try to make response videos, gave up. So what I did, I do the same format, StreamYard, once a week. I call it Address the Nation.
Calm se kitab. Yeah.
Right. So I take live calls, sort of like Atheist Experience kind of thing. And I've actually noticed that format is now repopularizing a lot with a lot of other people from other
And you
aspects.
get
Anyway,
you get a lot of calls, right?
I get a lot of calls. I get something like, I try to get at least 7 calls so I can put 7 videos for the whole week, but I get 10, 15. Some calls go over and on. So what that does, I interact with Muslims. I interact with religious apologists and obviously with ex-Muslims as well. And whoever calls in, I don't know who they are. And then I get a good 10, 11-minute footage, and I just put it out there. Every day I do that. So anyway, so Ghalib started with the same format. Ghalib was a guy who's also an asylum seeker. He also had to flee Pakistan, intellectual powerhouse. Been waiting, these guys are doing it really tough, and ex-Muslim Spartacus doing it really tough again. Hopefully, he'll end up in Canada very soon. Hopefully next year. This COVID,
yeah, but he's already outside of Pakistan, right?
Yeah, he's
already outside of Pakistan.
Yeah, he's in Nepal.
And you kind of helped do that. I remember you came on I have another show called Secular Jihadists, so
we did a bit of fundraising, but he's a brilliant guy. I mean, I just started a GoFundMe page. I didn't do much other than giving some moral support. But that's besides the point. So I've been putting out these videos every day, and there was this one caller, a burqa-clad woman, and I just shoved 434, Quran 434 in front of her, and how they do these mental gymnastics.
Quran 434 is, of course, the
wife-beating verse.
The verse that allows men to beat their wives in order to, if they fear disobedience. Yes.
Yeah. So I put that out in front of her, mental gymnastics. Yeah, look, a little bit, this and that, whatnot. So anyway, so I kicked her out because she wouldn't let me speak on my show. So she made a video with her husband detailing how people like me should be killed, we should be strung up in the middle of a square, and very violent language they use. Absolutely crazy people. But anyway, that doesn't get to me. I mean, I enjoy that. But I actually made a response video. I made a response video, very humorous, sarcastic response video as well. But what happened? Her video went viral, and some other guy out of nowhere, an ex-Muslim who had been keeping his mouth shut for the last 10 years or so, decided that, okay, this is it. And he started his own channel. And now that's got 10,000 subscribers. And his videos, are better than all of us. It just hits the mark. So my point was that the real success in this case is how many people are we inspiring? How many more people are coming out? And this guy just recently, so my point was, I started 2019. Now there are 4 Urdu channels. Between us, there's like more than 100,000 subscribers, and we're probably getting 2 million views a month.
Yeah, this is
all within the span of a year.
Like the COVID
all in native language.
It's like the way the COVID spread, right? You started to 4 people already. It's you mentioned
it's a pandemic. It's an atheist pandemic.
It's amazing. There, you mentioned Sharif Gabar, right, from Egypt. So this is like, for those who don't know, he's a really, really prominent atheist activist who makes phenomenal videos, like just content-wise, well produced. They're funny. They're just really, really smart. And he has been through hell for the last couple of years. He's been in jail. He's been, I don't know what he's going through at the hands of law enforcement. He's not able to get out of there. And so there is a contrast there between, what he does, and he is doing it while he's in Egypt. And he's trying to do this, and he's been pretty much, like, for the last couple of years, he's been silenced in a way. And this is the power of online activism in a way, that if he was somewhere else making those videos where he could speak freely, people in Egypt would still be able to access it, right? They'd still be able to watch it. He'd still have the same kind of reach, exact same content, but he would be able to continue making them. And this is not something you can do with traditional activism, which is done more on the ground. right? So is there?
Yeah.
That's got to. Do you have any? Because I know that there are a lot of activists in Pakistan. A lot of they call themselves secular activists or liberal or progressive, and so I know many of them, and I know, and some of them are very famous, and I know that they can't say that they're atheists. They cannot go there. They can't touch that. And it really restricts them to the extent that, and I'm sure you get this a lot too. But when I was writing my book, they were writing to me and telling me over and, can you include this? Make sure you tell them this. Make sure you put this in the book, because they couldn't say it there themselves. And I think that the fact that you're doing this now, sitting outside of Pakistan and doing it in Urdu to the same audience, where you might as well be in Pakistan, it's almost the same effect.
It's amazing. I'll tell you a funny story. You're right. I mean, the sad part of all of this is that there are influential people, celebrities, politicians. I've got 2 ministers on my WhatsApp, serving ministers at the moment who, don't touch these issues. But they're in touch with me. I'm like, whoa, even if someone finds out, they're like, yeah, no, the state is aware of this rise of atheism and whatnot. It's such a facade that they've created that they just cannot break through. And I think this is why activism has its place, that even though a state wants to go forward, but because there's a mob mentality, there's a status quo within the masses, that's why they're unable, and even the governments are too scared to bring any changes. I mean, if you look back in the last 15 years alone, actually include Pervez Musharraf as well, in the last 20 years alone, there have been so many attempts by Pakistani state, both military and the democratic governments, where they tried to make some progressive laws, but they were shut down and they got scared very quickly. Whether that is including giving more rights to Ahmadis, whether that's giving more rights to women, LGBTQ, all some legislations have been done at basic level. But the moment they reach the table, there is, some journalist, some Islamist journalist would write an article that there is a conspiracy of Jews that they're polluting the minds of our state and whatnot, and then the state backs off. So state can't really do anything actively. So activists in their independent capacities have to put out ideas and hope that within a generation or two, there would be a major shift in the thinking where people would say, okay, let's give more rights to women. Okay, it's fine if someone is gay. Okay, let's not deface or forcefully convert Hindus and Christians. So I think that's activism. That's why it's very important. And in other societies, in non-Islamic societies, the celebrities play that part. Celebrities put out these liberal ideas and values that slowly resonate with people. In the Western world for the last 100 years or so, at least that's been happening. But that is lacking in an Islamic country like Pakistan. As I said, you are aware of these celebrities, ministers, politicians, who are very liberal, if not atheists, but they're too scared to put out these ideas. So who's going to do it? A funny story I'll tell you. Very quickly, I'll tell you a funny story. There was this guy, I didn't know, I'm not very familiar, up to date with Pakistani celebrities and, the singers and movie stars. Even Hamza Alibasi, I very briefly knew who he was, and that's only because he was extremely good looking, and women will put up his photos on Facebook and whatnot. But there's so many other celebrities that I'm just not up to date with them. There was a singer, he sent me a message on Facebook a while ago, and I was like, yeah, I get so many messages. I sometimes read, but I don't respond. And he was like, you're doing great work. You're letting us, you're expressing us in a way. So I was like, okay. And then I think maybe 6 or 7 months later, because I keep those messages, I don't delete them. So 6 or 7 months later, he sends me a song, and that song has had over 1 million views. And then I looked up, whoa, this guy's big deal, who I just brushed off and I just ignored him. And then he said, hey, what do you think about this song? I was like, I listened to it, and it was an amazing song. And I was like, whoa. I said, I'm your fan. And he said, what? I've been your fan for so long. I was like, oh, wow. So we're both fans of each other. It's just amazing that celebrities in a suffocating society like Pakistan, even celebrities who are somewhat privileged, high fences and big houses and travel freely, even they can't express the feeling.
Yeah. That's a big thing, because when you talk about politicians and ministers and everything like that, like I know about that, and I know they can't speak about it. That is honestly, that's a case here in the U.S. too. I mean, you have with
Is it really?
yeah, in the United States too. I mean, you know what the U.S. is like. I mean, you can't really go out. There's a few Congress people who come out and said that they're atheist or agnostic, but depending on who your voters are, they won't openly say it, right? Even if they are, you definitely can't run for president and say you're an atheist. So I understand it with politicians, but in Pakistan, like the stuff that I was getting was from, and that you have gotten too, as you mentioned, is from people who are celebrities, who are journalists, who are supposed to speak their ideas unabashedly and openly, and they're very brave people. They'll go around, they'll talk about things that will that are provocative, that often put their lives in danger. And even some of these people will not go as far as to come out as atheists. They're always going to talk about some really, really liberal interpretation of Islam, and some sort of very broad, like hippy dippy Sufi type thing. But they won't come out and actually say that they're non-believers. I mean, that's how bad it is. It's actually, when you have journalists, and sort of the journalists and the activists are the sort of the conscience of a society in a way, right? The political and the social conscience of a society. And when they're not able to talk about anything, if there's something that is taboo or just off limits to them, because they're afraid of their own security and their life, their livelihood, then what do? You can't. And you and I, fortunately, and this is why I think that it wasn't, when people say, well, why did you do that? You've got such a good life, you can just kind of have fun, enjoy yourselves. Because I grew up there and I know the situation, and I feel like it's, we take so much for granted. I mean, there's people in jail who do exactly what we do. There's people who've been persecuted, there are people who've been mobbed to death, there are people who've been executed by their governments for doing the kind of thing we can do, because and we are able to do that in a place where we have a lot more security. And now with the internet, we are able to, and with YouTube and social media, we're able to reach them in their own language, as you do. And this is why I call this the power of online activism, because there was this sort of impression that these Slacktivists or internet activists, they kind of armchair experts who just sit there and just click away at a keyboard. They don't do anything. Well, the Tahrir Square protests were organized by Wael Ghanim on Facebook, right? All the Iranian protests, nobody knew what was going on there if it wasn't for Twitter, if it wasn't for YouTube. For years, we never saw the Palestinian side of things in Israel and Palestine. We never saw any of those videos because there was a certain the news corporations were allowed. It was easier to control. Now it isn't. And online activism actually has a much more extensive reach and influence.
It's it's quite bizarre that how definitions work. People have always told people, and it doesn't bother me. Like, I mean, I was talking to someone yesterday about how there's a definition of a real celebrity instance. Like if you're on a TV show, that TV episode has been watched by, let's say, 100,000 people in the United States, or probably 1 million is actually considered a very successful show. But then you also put out a video that's 40 minutes long or an hour long, and that is viewed by 1 million people on social media. But on the other hand, the prestige of being on TV is considered a real celebrity. You get a blue tick, you get paparazzis chasing you, but on the other hand, you're just a YouTube activist. So I think at the end of the day, it just doesn't really matter whether the status quo or the hierarchy, where you fit in. At the end of the day, throughout human history, the main power has been how charismatic you are, and that is determined by the number of followers you have. So if you have people who are listening to you, if there are 1 million people listening to you in a week or in a month, that accounts for something. I'll give you an example. So my book was obviously self-published. There was only in Australia, publishers are a little bit careful. So one publisher showed some interest and kept me in a limbo for about a couple of weeks, and then eventually said, No, we're not gonna we're not gonna publish it. I don't know whether that was the true reason they gave, that it's too controversial. Maybe that they just thought that I didn't have any credentials to have a book published. So I said, okay, that's fine. So I went about my own way, and I had it self-published. I had 10,000 copies sold.
And now
in
it's
a year and a bit.
translated in Urdu too, right?
It's translated in Urdu. We have illegal downloads of 16,000. Nearly 10,000 are in Pakistan. Most of them, and most of them are in. Sorry, the other way around. 10,000 in India and nearly 4,000 in Pakistan. That 15,000 books, and if you add in 10,000 sales, 25,000. That's a bestseller in a way. But again, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether I get a blue tick or not, whether I get a pat on the back by the status quo that, okay, you are a real activist. I don't care whether what matters is what I'm saying and what I'm putting out there. Is it really reaching people's hearts? Is it really making any impact? It's so easy. Every day, as I said, I wake up in the morning, I edit my videos, I put one video up there. As I said, it's been my goal for the last 5 months that I'm going to put out one video every day. I've been doing it with very little financial incentive. As I said initially, now the support has been growing, but we're driven by a passion because we believe that maybe it's going somewhere. And that is a reward within itself. And that's why we keep doing it. And I think only when history is being written, nobody realizes it's being written. Again, I don't want to self-congratulate myself. It sounds like, my head is stuck so far back up my backside. As I said, it's a team effort. The 4 Pakistani YouTubers who are now producing content in Urdu, and atheism all of a sudden is a big deal in Pakistan. It's a big problem. It is spreading more wildly than we have imagined in our wildest imagination. And maybe we are writing history. Maybe something is happening. We don't know. Maybe in 10 years' time, we will see how far we've gone into it. Ex-Muslim movement within itself. We have seen the ex-Muslim movement. I always credit Mariam Namazi for starting that movement.
Yeah.
Even though some of us had been atheists before that, but the popularizing of the term ex-Muslim, there's hardly any people, I would say, people who are interested in the topic, not the mainstream Muslim people who just don't care about it. There are hardly any people who, or dawa guys, or people who preach Islam. There are hardly any of those scholars and activists who don't know about this ex-Muslim phenomenon. And it has progressed to a point that they openly used to say, let's behead them or kill them. But now we're seeing from within the Islamic community, people are saying, okay, let's engage them in conversation. Okay, that's fine if they're atheists. That's okay. They're even softening their attitude towards blasphemy itself. When I first started videos in Urdu, and I knew that would be the outcome of that. In the West, so atheist and blasphemy Danish cartoons, it's about 15 years old now, that happened, and now we know that naturally people do get desensitized. Now, Muslims are not likely to react to Danish cartoons as violently as they did in 2005.
I mean, they're everywhere. I remember when the Danish cartoons came out. When I first saw them, I saw the picture.
Even I was like, whoa.
It was so alien because I'd never seen anything like that before. People had not done it. The only thing I knew of was Salman Rushdie and the Danish cartoon. And this is not too long ago. It was 2006. And when I saw, and now it's just completely normalized. And I feel like, what you're saying, where people are like, it's okay if you're an atheist, and Hamza Alibasi is coming in and he's engaging with you in a one-on-one.
We're doing another one in the next couple of days. I think Monday. We're doing another one.
Awesome. And there's so when these things are happening, it is becoming normalized, and there is this idea that they think, okay, well, now it's time, they're up there, we have to debate them, we have to engage them. But when they do engage you, don't tell anybody this, but when they do engage you, it gives you even more legitimacy.
Of course it does.
Now you're not like, okay, we're gonna ignore these like little ex-Muslim insects or hiding under the rocks, whatever. It's a fringe, we're not gonna care about it. But now engaging with them, equal value, ex-Muslim, Muslim, like it's a very different thing. And
of course it does.
Yeah.
And a lot of people told me, oh, why didn't you get Hamza Alibasi? Why didn't you just go full on punch on with him and whatnot? Some people say I did I performed really poorly, which I don't think so. I haven't. I mean, my standard is, I mean, nobody has called me that, hey, Harris, I used to be an atheist thanks to you, but after listening to your conversation with Hamza Alibasi, I've reverted back to Islam. So no one has actually said that to me. On the other hand, a lot of people who I reached out because he's a big name. I reached out to a lot of other people. I gained a lot of new audience because of him, and so many new atheists came through that. So engaging, and time to time I put out videos targeting big names, within a respectable yet sarcastic manner. And they know that. They know they got 1 million subscribers, and if they even mention my name, this funny thing is that now on TVs, people have sent me snippets where the scholars are talking about atheists. There was Bold TVs, and they're talking about atheists. And when you talk about mulhid, or when you talk about Pakistani mulhid, the first thing that comes up is me, but they don't mention you by name, which is they are aware that whatever it happens, it's going to bring more legitimacy. It's going to give more exposure to us, and it's only a matter of time that whether they do it or not. We keep doing it, and
it's a tough spot because, and I'll tell you,
you can't engage.
So I work in medical communications, and I'll tell you, there's a thing, when they say there's no such thing as bad publicity. You come to a point where something is so big now that you either have to ignore it, in which case it'll just keep on getting bigger unopposed, or you have to engage with it, in which case you're going to end up giving it some legitimacy. And
exactly.
That is the spot they're in. And that's, again, the power of online activism. And there's nothing, usually when that happened in the past, if it ever happened in the past, they would just clamp down on it. What did Iran do? The government came down, they had all of this stuff.
Ban the book, shut down the publisher, end of story.
Right. Yeah, end of story.
No TV exposure, end of story.
But now, they can't do anything. So they'd bring out force, they'd, clamp down on the protesters. That's what they used to do in the old days, right? With traditional activism, they used to ban books. All of these, it was just all these draconian measures. And now when they're at that spot, they have no choice. They either let it grow unopposed, or they say we just have to engage with it. It's going to give it legitimacy, but from their point of view, it's a lesser of the two evils. And they can't get you. They can't get to you. Right, and so they have no choice. They can't shut you up.
There is an Achilles heel. There isn't. We have an Achilles heel as well.
Of course,
all of our eggs are in the same basket, where we put in on YouTube, and obviously try to diversify. I mean, I've been trying to get more Twitter followers, and I don't know. I think I'm been stuck at 6,000 for a while. Facebook is horrendous. My page with 25,000. Was shut down, and asked some people to ring, and they reopened it. But my profile, out of 12 months, I think I'm banned 11 months.
Yeah.
It just gets mass supported by Pakistan. So Facebook is horrible when it comes to that. I actually like Trump on that with their war. I'll come to that if you want to talk about it. I know you hate Trump, but
that doesn't mean that I don't think that there are certain things that.
But he's getting criticized on that as well, picking a fight with Twitter. Anyway, so that's our Achilles heel as well. If YouTube is the most reasonable out of all of them. I haven't found Twitter to be unreasonable either, but other people have complained. Mm-hmm. But if YouTube pulls the plug on us, that's going to be a massive dent in our movement. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, Facebook has already given in. So that is our Achilles heel as well. But I don't know whether Google will give in to these. But the way how liberal media is going, this bleeding heart, Islamophobia, this Islamic appeasement, that movement is going, that still worries me that it might end up pressuring YouTube, for instance, that there's Islamophobic element on it. We can say all we want that, hey, this is not against Muslims, it's just a intellectual discussion about Islam. We can say all we want, but when the pressure rises on these corporations, then it could hit. But again, YouTube might be But having said that, but YouTube might also be rethinking its policies. As lenient as it is, there's still some restrictions, and we can see that now. For example, Joe Rogan's $100 million deal, and some people are speculating that is because there was so much restrictions on what he could and what he couldn't say. So, and also we've heard that YouTube has been underpaying. They charge you 30% from your revenue. So YouTube might also be under pressure for doing more. It's not just yes, most of the money comes from the prank videos or all the fashion vlogs and makeup artists and all that, but there's a huge portion of that comes from activism as well, and that's very important for YouTube as well. So I think it's going to be very interesting, but it's going to be very hard to predict which way it's going to go.
So I think that different platforms have, so we've had different issues on different. So you said you've struggled with Twitter. For me, Twitter has been really my main following, and Facebook, like there's been just tens of thousands of loads. I don't even know how many there are right now. But I have been with secular jihadists, right? We have been several times, like Twitter shut us down, and then there've been all these appeals, and we've been brought back up. We've had to write to people like, for example, like Sam Harris is a huge supporter, and he knows, he knows Jack Dorsey, and so that we've had. But most people like Hamid Abdul Samad, I know that he was shut down from YouTube. We had secular jihadists we've had two episodes that are taken down from YouTube. One is it was an interview with it was called The Former White Nationalist. So this guy was formerly a white nationalist, Leon Korteweg, one of the most brilliant guys I know.
We met him in Amsterdam.
In Amsterdam, yeah. And he was talking, he's like super, super leftist now, and he was talking about how bad it is to be a neo-Nazi and a white nationalist, and giving us ideas about what caused him to go that route, and then eventually how he got out of it. YouTube pulled it down because it had white nationalist in the title. They took what was the other video they took down was an interview that I did with Zach al-Rais. He was a Saudi refugee who's now in Germany. And it was just a person. It was actually just me and him. Armin wasn't there, and for some reason that's been taken down. And we have been, secular jihadists has been demonetized, so we can't make any money from YouTube. No super chats, no nothing like that. Obviously, we keep it going anyway. So with Facebook, it's a problem. With YouTube, with Twitter, I think it's been much more reasonable overall. But you're right. I mean, there's very few of these platforms, and I think I don't know what the solution to this is. I think one of the solutions is to find people who work there, learn to be over there, like actually, say infiltrate. I'm trying to avoid the word infiltrate, but
it'll get banned again. This video will get blocked as well if you use it.
Yeah, well, I don't care about this video.
I also wanted to say to people, now these are the things that yes, sure, good point, and I think ex-Muslims in North America have done well in communicating with Facebook, but they haven't communicated with YouTube because YouTube hasn't historically given us as hard time as Facebook has. Facebook is the worst, and it just laid down in front of Trump. And Trump was bullying that, yes, I'm going to remove that legislation that immunes you from your users putting out terrible things out there. So I'm going to immune you. I'm going to remove that immunity so you can be targeted if someone puts a racist comment or someone puts a silly, stupid comment. And then Zuckerberg on the next day on Fox, he gave an interview and he said, "Oh yeah, look, I don't think we should be the arbiters of truth. Meaning, we shouldn't be deciding." But Facebook,
but they do. They're the worst.
They are the worst. My posts get deleted. There was a post where I said, when Australian bushfires happened, there was a model who said that she will take off her clothes if someone donates $100,000 or something like that. Pretty model or whatnot. So I shared that with a comment. I said, I would do that too, but I'm not sure if anyone would like to see me naked. I got removed for that.
Oh, Harris, a lot of people would like to see you naked.
Well, I don't know about that, but 30-day ban, And I also got a warning that you've had repeated, and so many videos, so many of my. So that is the arbitration of truth. They are being the judge, jury, and executioner, and they are deciding that what goes up and what doesn't go up. And then when Trump just scares them, threatens them, at least Twitter kept its head up and said, they trolled Trump, that this is false news, and that was the first one. The second one was like, you're glorifying violence. Fair enough. At least they're sticking to their gun. But Zuckerberg is just a sucker. I mean, I despise that individual and the way he runs Facebook.
And on the other hand, like a lot of he's got people everywhere. He's got people like you pissed at him, but then he's also got a lot of these the lefties pissed at him because he's not cracking down on political misinformation. But anyway, so that's one thing. So those are some of the limitations when it comes to.
Sorry, very quickly, I wanted to make a point on before we move to the next one about another point I could give about glorifying this medium that we have on social media. I think someone here said that as well. It's not just Pakistan. I didn't even know that in a country like Bhutan, they spoke or understood Urdu/Hindi. And I've had Muslims writing to me from Bhutan that we love your stream and you've shaken our faith and blah, blah, blah. So, it's quite amazing that you as an individual, you're saying something and you don't even know where it's going. Back in the old day, you'll go to a big hall and you can look at 200 people and you go, okay, my message is going to these people. Yeah. But now you don't even know the countries that it's going to. So it's just quite amazing.
So I wanted to ask, well, before we move on to, actually, you know what? I'll ask you right now. Usman Khan has a question. He's saying, what is the ultimate goal of the ex-Muslim movement? There seems to be a dogmatism to some, but not all ex-Muslims that I've seen.
Well, I would say that again, it's all individuals. There's no secret society of ex-Muslims where we sit down and decide what should it be. But I think overwhelming majority would agree. We are chronic rationalists in a sense. If it doesn't make sense, throw it out. I mean, but what we are fighting for, and this is where ex-Muslims are different from atheists or ex-Christians in the Western world. We are asking for that equality, that at least that equality that atheists enjoy in the Western world. Sure, that's way off at the moment, but we put out something. We don't want to get killed. Ex-Muslims' lives matter, so to speak. That's what we're putting out, because there are people, and Usman, I'm assuming you're from. I'm not sure whether you're Muslim or not, but you are.
Oh, he is actually. Yeah, I know him. He's an old friend of my brother's, actually. I think.
Right. So, so either way,
guy, I think. Yeah.
Probably Pakistan. So. Mm-hmm. You would realize that what would happen if someone just tells his parents that he's an atheist, let alone if the word gets out in the street, what would happen? So if we were breaking these taboos, that's the goal. The first time is normalizing. I mean, it is normalizing. I had a knock-on effect. I've put out so many videos about Islam, about Prophet Muhammad, discussing Prophet Muhammad's sex life. I even call him Hazrat Muhammad because, I'm not provoking unnecessarily, but I'm discussing his sex life. I'm discussing his londis. Londis is a word that triggers them, which means sex slaves. I'm discussing all of that. And I'm discussing it so casually, in a sense, in a society that the moment someone even says half a mile away, Prophet Muhammad, the whole room says Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and then start hitting their fingers and all that, because they have this demagoguery. They've created a demigod out of Prophet Muhammad, even though they would say no, he's just a prophet. They've actually put Muhammad above God themselves. So that is a society. It's so confused society. So that is a society. And here is this guy, Pakistani, seems reasonable, but yeah, sure, he's a bit rude. But he's just talking about a prophet. The guy we even bow our head to, we start kissing our fingers, we start reciting duroods. When his name is mentioned, this guy is just discussing his sex life, his the cum stains on his tracky decks, and what is this guy? That has a knock-on effect. It's like, okay, Prophet Muhammad is being humanized, and people are now starting to see, oh, okay, so that's another step. So that's another goal as my friend Spartacus says that the in his words, the biggest goal is, translate that in English. We want to this. How would you say it in English? It's so subcontinent thing to say that they have this. They have this vision of religion that is just so sacred that ordinary mere mortals can't even talk about it. Just can't even, let alone talking about it. You can't even think about this. So first thing we just got to do to these people is that it's okay. It's okay. Let's calm down. Let's have a little chat. So that, in his words, that's his goal. But I think at the end of the day, it's just normalizing it. If we normalize these things,
yeah,
the people talk about it. There was a group in Beacon House students. They sent me, actually, there was another video where it wasn't Beacon House. There was this teacher who played me messages of young kids. I mean, this is one of the calls when I'm not a very emotional, lovey-dovey kind of a warm, fuzzy kind of a guy, but she played these messages from these kids in Pakistan, some school. I think they were probably 8th or 9th grade or something, or maybe 10th, I don't know. And they were asking these deep intellectual questions. And I was like, whoa. And not only just that, that girl, the teacher, young female herself, very interesting story she's got as well. She actually did master's degree in Islamic studies, and she's like, what the hell is this? And she's done a couple of posts with me where she's showing screenshots of books, how ridiculous they are. But anyway, teachers are other warriors. They're frontline warriors. I know 3 teachers who subliminally saw the seeds of these doubt in the young minds of these students, and where they just say, read between the lines kind of a thing. They would say something, well, what do you think? Is slavery okay? I don't know. What do you think? So they put out these messages and these absorbing minds of children. So anyway, one of those teachers, she played these messages of these kids, and I was like almost teary-eyed. I was like, wow, what am I doing? Where is this going? I mean, these kids are going to grow up. These kids are going to become politicians, bureaucrats, go in the army, which is such an important institute in Pakistan. Yeah. I'm saying I'm feeling pity for these mullah brigade, for these madrasa graduates, because madrasa graduates, you're not going to get a scientist out of a madrasa. You're not going to get a prime minister out of a madrasa. Very unlikely. You're not going to get an army general out of a madrasa. Very unlikely. You're going to get these guys from these good schools who might be listening to Ali Rizvi. They're going to grow up. They're going to hold these powers. What are they going to do to you then? I have a feeling, and again, it's pure conjecture and could be my optimism running wild, in 20, 30 years, when this generation comes to power, there's going to be a very nasty revolution in a sense. Unless there's another way, you have 30 years to slowly evolve into a progressive liberal society. But if it stays like this, but nobody gives up power that easily. But I think Pakistan is a unique case. It might not need a bloody revolution like you would need in Iran or Saudi Arabia, because Pakistan does have a tendency of democratic institutes where they have a tendency of passing sort of liberal legislations. So it's going to be very interesting. But one thing I always say, one thing we can always be sure of, that societies never remain the same. Never. Yeah. They always evolve.
Yeah. I think that, when you answer this, the goal of the ex-Muslim movement, I think I agree with Spartacus. I mean, when I started this, my only frustration was that I want a room where you can talk about these things. I don't want just a room. I want a room where you can broadcast these conversations, just a place to talk. That's it. Safe space where you can talk about it, even though that's a very maligned term nowadays. And the second goal, I think, so Usman, many people have different people, as Harris said, different people have different goals. Some people come from a background of oppression where they were, forced to do a lot of religious things that they didn't want to do. And this especially applies to a lot of young girls who grow up and they have to, some of them undergo genital mutilation. Others, are forced to cover their hair. They're told how to dress and how to act by generally the men in the family, and so on. So so some of them come out of that. Others want to just get their own societies, their own Muslim societies where they live, to start thinking more critically to make advances in science, to actually get to make more scientific progress. And they find religion to be pervasive. Hudbo is a good example of that. They find religious fundamentalism to be an impediment to that. And then finally, politically, I think a lot of us just want to see separation of the religion and the state. We want the state to be secular. Secular doesn't mean it's anti-Muslim. Secularism actually guarantees you freedom of religion more than any other system. Guarantees it to you. You know, if you have an Islamic government, that's not going to guarantee freedom of religion for everybody. Secular system will guarantee freedom of religion for pretty much everybody. So we want that where the state doesn't and politics don't mix. So there are several goals that we all have. I think it's a mixture of all of them for many of us. I have another question for you from somebody. Harris, you're going to love this one. When a Pakistani becomes an atheist, he becomes an Indian automatically. Hopefully, Harris will denounce the Islamic State of Pakistan built on the ancestral land of the Hindus. So I want to ask you something tagged related to this, and this is just one question from some guy. But you do get co-opted, and I know I've gotten co-opted by a lot of these sort of far-right nut jobs, whether they're like in the Hindutva nationalists or whether they're even, you know, a lot of these sort of far-right conservative Christian evangelicals or just people like that. They love having people like us and to be able to use people like us for sound bites and things because we're kind of poster boys for them. And see, you know, he comes from the society and he thinks just the way I do. And he hates Muslims too, or he hates Islam too. How do you handle that? I've seen the way you handle a lot of the sort of Hindu jihadis, Hindutva jihadis, but what is your take on that? And how would you, a lot of this is about advising sort of young activists who want to do this kind of thing and whatever. So how do they deal with the kind of positive attention from the kind of people they don't want positive attention from?
I'm understanding more and more their point of view. And again, I'm not sympathetic with Hindutva fascists and whatnot, but this gentleman might not be, I think it might be unfair to call him a right-wing Hindutva or anything, but he's definitely, yeah. But in his case, but this is also problematic for me, and I've said it numerous times, and I think this is why he says hopefully Harris will denounce it, because I think he might be aware of my views on that issue. So he's just a proud Indian nationalist who takes pride in his Indian heritage, and there's this movement in India where they're trying to Indianify everything pre-Islamic conquest. They want to take it back to that because they believe that was the real era of the glory days of Hinduism. Again, people living in past and glorifying past.
Indianify or Hindufy? Because India is a very secular, pluralistic. The world's largest.
Maybe Bharatify would be a good thing, because some of these people also say that even if you're not Hindu as a faith, that's fine. But there's a rich history and tradition and culture of Bharat. India is obviously, they have a problem with India as well. Apparently, there's a very growing movement that they want to change the name from Republic of India to Republic of Bharat, or something like that. So I understand where people want to take pride in that, because there is a sense in them that had they been more, to me it's a wrong diagnosis, but they have a strong feeling that had they been more nationalistic or more, they wouldn't like to use the word, but more xenophobic, as we understand, then these outside cultures like Islam and then British would not have been able to conquer them. That's one of the view that they hold, that had it not been like this. And that's why they call secularism secularism, meaning it's sickness. Even though then they say our Indian philosophy itself is secular. And look, there like any system, there's so many problems in Indian secularism as well. That is true that sometimes Hindus actually do get treated unfairly. I'll give you one example, that the temples are under state's control, but mosques are not. And Muslims have, and because Muslims have always had this, Muslims have always been nationalist in that sense, that they, even when British tried to absorb mosques under the state's control, Muslims stood up and and they introduced an article that all religious places will be under state's control except Muslims, except mosques. So Muslims won, and because they were very active in defending their faith and their identity. But Hindus, on the other hand, were careless, and the temples went under British control, and then when India got independence, and now it's under state's control, and state actually tried to get money out of temples to fight COVID-19. So then again, this fighting, they're saying, why? What kind of secularism is this? I mean, you got to treat everyone equally. So I understand where there's a lot of anger is rising in India. But again, I have to draw a line somewhere. Now, I always say the same thing. Yes, one could argue that creation of Pakistan might have been a mistake. But now it is there. It's a reality. I was born in Pakistan. Sure, you want to call me Indian. I am a son of that soil. I'm not an Arab. I am an Indian. I always say, I build a strong case. If anyone who's willing to use the term India, it's Pakistanis who should use it, because the Indus civilization actually started where there is Pakistan today.
I call myself, I always say that I'm Indian Pakistani, because, you know, if you look at, my parents were born in India, right? My dad was born in Allahabad. My mother was born in Delhi. And I was born in Lahore, Pakistan, after the creation of Pakistan. So what you have is, if you have somebody who's born in the US, but their parents were born in Italy, they call themselves Italian American. So that would make me an Indian Pakistani. So it's a completely legitimate term. Yeah,
exactly. And the point is, again, my birth certificate still says born in Pakistan. So I'm not going to just deny the existence of Pakistan. But there are people who say that. Now, as he said in the question, it says it's an Islamic state of Pakistan. Yeah, sure, it might be Islamic Republic of Pakistan. But I also believe that societies, countries evolve. And I am more interested in evolving Pakistan rather than dissolving Pakistan. There's another school of thought in India that there should be a Khand Bharat, meaning include Bangladesh and Pakistan and absorb everything in one joint, strong India. There are various ideas. And I don't see anything wrong if all the people of this subcontinent say, yeah, sure, we want to become one country again. Then so be it. But I don't see that happening. That is not going to happen. Pakistan has developed its own identity, which is very shaky. I understand that. There are lots of problems in that. But I would rather see Pakistan evolve, become progressive, become liberal, and live 1,000 years, I'd say.
Yeah. Okay, well, amen. I had to ask, so we're talking about online activism. First of all, what are the tips you have for somebody who wants to do this, who has something to say, who wants to be involved, who wants to make a change, and they are, there's traditional protests, and they're kind of sitting at home. They don't know exactly how to get started. How do you go about it? How do you get started? Well, what advice do you have for them?
Well, the modern world is all about going viral. So, this is why there's a conflict where people do silly things to go viral. Now, obviously, if you're an activist and you want to be taken seriously, you can't get involved in that kind of gimmickry. So you've got to have something. Now, Armin obviously made that wonderful video about Allah is gay, and that went viral. It was deleted. He put it up again and went viral again because it was such a powerful idea. And that went viral. And, Armin is a very well-known, famous guy. So at the end of the day, it matters what you're selling. Who was it? I think who said it that I can't remember who said it. That he said, for example, even people who want to be rich as well. So it's the cause that matters. People who make wonderful products as well, they genuinely believed in those products. That becomes their passion. They're not worried about the money at that point. The money does come as a side effect. And in this case, activism, if your passion is about a certain topic and you are so passionate about it, because, as I said, because what motivates me to put up a video every day in the morning? There's no financial incentive. When I first started doing it, I didn't have many followers. I didn't have 20,000 followers. Nobody. But because I'm passionate, and some people, this is why people give up, because they're not passionate about it. They're looking at the money, or they're looking at the fame.
They're looking at the follower count. Yeah,
exactly. So you just got to do your thing. And if you are, and there's also a natural competition in the world, a survival of the fittest, so to speak, in activism as well. If your message is strong, if you are charismatic in delivering your message strongly, I mean, for example, if you have stutter and you're not a good speaker, then it's probably, or you might need speech therapy or whatnot. All of these things, unfortunately, matter, because at the end of the day, what we're selling, what as an activist, what you're selling an idea. And if that idea is not just strong, but also cosmetically, aesthetically good looking, then unfortunately it's not going to resonate. So I'm not putting anyone out if you do have a stutter or you need speech therapy. There's always something that we can do. I remember when I first started making videos, I would be very nervous and I wouldn't know what to talk about. Should I read off a paper or not? And then I'll start speaking. You learn as you go. But again, at the end of the day, still what matters the most is how strongly you believe in your cause, because that will propel you. Your cause will propel you. Oh, Malij is here.
Malij is saying maybe if you showed some skin, Harris, you'd have more followers.
Right. All I can do is this at this moment. And no, I don't think you want to see my skin at the moment. I haven't been going to the gym. That's one downside of that. And I've got a gunt now. My gunt has expanded. So Ali, when we were giving you crap when we were in Amsterdam,
my gunt's gone down.
Oh wow, my gunt.
I've been working out regularly now, and it was amazing. Like the first few weeks, the first thing that I still got the love handles and everything a little bit, but I just noticed I'm wearing the same shirts and I can't feel them touching my belly. It's like, wow. That's good. That just happened in a few weeks. I mean, I'm not aiming to be a bodybuilder. I'm 45 years old. I just want to make sure
that got to be fit. No, but you feel good. I mean, no, but I think that's another thing. They say you got to take good care of yourself. You don't have to look like chiseled Ryan Gosling. You don't have to. But then all of these things add up. And going to the advice to activists, you've got to be charismatic. You've got to be. I mean, you are an influencer. You're wanting to be an influencer. I mean, how can you influence someone if you don't have something attractive about you? Again, I don't mean that good looking as a Brad Pitt kind of good looking thing. I'm just saying good looking as an attractive. I got to be attracted to what you're saying, how you're delivering it. Even the quality of the videos matter a lot. This guy, as I said, I promote a lot of people, and I see the difference. There's one guy I've been
ultimately Harris, though I don't think it's that big a deal. Looks thing, because I know that there are a lot of people. For instance,
I'm not talking about looks. I'm not talking about looks isn't like you have to look good and you have to have great hairstyles. I'm saying something.
I mean, not everybody's gorgeous like both of us. But
right. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the message itself being aesthetically good. I mean, if you are arming and ahhing and I'll give you an example. The two people I started promoting together. Maybe one was a week after or whatnot. This other guy has a little bit of a stutter. Very nice, very brilliant guy, intelligent as hell. So many books and everything. And his channel is just not gaining any traction. And he's talking about the same thing. And this other guy came out of nowhere. His delivery is just immaculate. Maybe he reads off a paper or something. I don't know. And that one is skyrocketing. So there's always something there that you're selling a product to people. I mean, imagine you sell an iPhone in a really crappy box. I mean, what purpose does a box present or serve? But we make it look good. And when you go to the grocery stores, people make colors and merchandising matters so much. It's a whole art. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying good looking as in like you gotta have blonde hair and blue eyes and chisel, but I'm saying the message should be attractive to people.
Yeah. So, and I want to say, like, for a lot of you, I mean, so a lot of people might find that, like, okay, well, how do I make really good videos? How can I make quality this or quality that? There are other ways. If your strength is in speak, the important thing, as Harris said, is the idea and how strongly you believe in it. And I'll tell you what, if there is an idea that you strongly believe in, and especially this is usually what triggers activism for a lot of people. There's an idea you strongly believe in and you don't feel like it's being said out there enough and getting the attention it deserves, then it almost naturally will try to come out of you. And when it does, it'll be scary. The first time you articulate it is going to be scary. It's going to feel intimidating. Like, oh, if I say this, I might lose friends. People might get mad at me. What is everybody going to say? Or am I still going to have the kind of life I do? And all of those things are completely normal. And if you don't want to get up in front of a camera and do the video, you can write. You can write. If you don't want to write, you can do a podcast. If you feel like, you want to speak, but you don't want to be seen, if you feel self-conscious in whatever way, there are many different mediums in which you can go about doing this. And all of these things are different. They're different.
And you got to work hard. And you got to work hard. I mean, we've all had those moments when we see, I mean, I'll give you my example. I was struggling to put 2 videos in a week because that pre-recorded video, that takes an effort, editing, writing a script and talking about it, doing research and whatnot. Whereas, but in a live format, you can just share your knowledge. You're not concerned about how you're saying it because it's just live. If I remember a story that I read in a book or whatnot, or I remember a point, I'll say it. And because it's live, people have a different attitude towards it. But I was struggling with that. So I thought, okay, I made a shortcut. I record 1 video, live calls once a week. And then I have enough footage that I can put out every week. Now that's my format, and it is kind of a work. It's kind of working. But then there are other people who do their research, make a very good aesthetic video, and it goes viral, and people love it. So you got to find again. There's every moment you'd be like, what's the point? Why am I doing it? It's not giving me any subscribers. It's not giving me any views. I've put so much effort into it. Again, that if you're not looking at the end product, like how many people are watching, how famous you're getting, or how much money you're making, if you're not looking at that, if you have a tunnel vision, you're just concerned about your cause, it would go. And you'll find a way along the way. You'll find a way along the way. If I do this a little bit, that would work. If I do this, that'll work.
And you can be honestly, like opportunism can also be very profitable. There are people who don't necessarily believe in what they say, but because the tide is going a certain way on social media, it's actually pretty easy. There's no hard and fast rule. But I think ultimately what endures is people who are true to their ideas. So one more question that I want to ask you about the current protests that are going on, if you have time. Kamal Chaudhary is asking, hi Harris, since your channel is blocked in Pakistan, how do you think people are responding to the message you're bringing for them? Have you seen any impact? A few weeks ago, I saw a couple publicly asking Muslims to silence you. Are you in any kind of risk in Melbourne?
No, my channel is not blocked in Pakistan. What happens is my videos get blocked. And that was one of my motivations and why I wanted to put out 1 video every day. Mm-hmm. Apparently how it works is that YouTube doesn't block entire channels in individual countries, and Pakistan is at the forefront of it. YouTube blocks videos once it receives a formal request from the cyber authority in that country. So by the time Pakistan makes a complaint, sends it to YouTube, the whole process takes about a month, and then it gets blocked. So individual videos. Now I'm putting 30 videos in a month. I've bombarded them. So they can't block my entire channel. And then other ways, I've shared people that they can, if they change their country in YouTube, like they change the country from Pakistan to, let's say, United States in their account, and then use VPN on top of it, then they'll be able to see the videos as well. But a lot of people don't go through that much hassle. But it's still, as I said, the videos are being, so many videos being put forward. And again, after all that hard work, and I'm thinking about it, because Abdullah Gondal's videos are very calculated, they get blocked very quickly. Last one, he did a psychoanalysis of Prophet Muhammad. Hasn't gone.
I love it.
It hasn't been blocked yet, but I'm expecting it'll be blocked in the next few days. But and I'm going to create a playlist. I'm going to re-upload all his videos. And once it gets blocked, I'm going to re-upload it. The only reason why I hadn't done it at this point is because, like, it discourages you because it has 100,000 views. And if I delete it and re-upload it, or I would have to delete it because otherwise there'll be duplication. And I haven't worked it out yet. But my point is, all their hard work that they put in, the cyber team, and they write up emails and they send it to YouTube, I can upload it just like that.
But when you upload it, are you saying that you're uploading it again from your channel, or just starting
from my channel, because my channel is not blocked. It's
so they can't. So I understand. Oh, so that's a good way. That's a really good tip, by the way. That's a tip.
Yeah.
What they can do is they can block your videos. So I think something similar happened probably with the Allah is gay thing, because I kept on seeing it crop up. I mean, people were uploading it. And for those who don't know, the Allah is gay is Armin basically went to Vancouver. He was in Vancouver, and the gay pride parade was happening, the LGBT pride parade, and he had a big sign that said Allah is gay written in rainbow colors, and he was going through the streets. And these are the leftist, most liberal people ever, and they loved it. Why did they love it? Because they think they believe, and it is true, that being gay is a compliment. And when you're taking Allah and you're painting him as something that is that's beautiful to them, they love it. So the support that he got, amazingly, was from a lot of these super left liberal people, and the people got angry at him. Where there were probably there were a few, like, there's a Pakistani guy, there were a couple other people got mad at him, but in general, he was very well received, and this drove people insane. I think it wasn't just him running around with that sign; it was also how people were reacting to him positively. That really drove people insane. They kept on reporting it and getting it down.
I think Kamal asked a follow-up question on that. So you get a lot of audience. Yes. So 40% of my audience is Indian. 28% last month were Pakistanis, and then rest were from everywhere else. So 28% out of million, you can understand that's more or less nearly thereabouts 300,000 out of million views were in Pakistan. And considerably, given that Pakistan is so many times smaller than India, that's a pretty good penetration. I looked at it, and the funny thing is, and I've shared these screenshots to show to people, because a lot of people say, "Oh, you've only got comments from Hindu nationalists," because so many I get, surprisingly enough, this is what annoys me about Facebook, and I can't respond to people because I'm blocked most of the time. Most of the comments private messages I get, 90% of them are from Pakistanis. They're not publicly commenting on YouTube. Even YouTube is so anonymous, people are scared to comment on YouTube videos. So that gives an illusion, a majority of even though they are, but it's not a big majority of your followers or watchers or supporters or subscribers are Hindus, but they're not. I am quite confident that the message is penetrating deep, and I have statistics, and you can easily look up in the audience. I got 40% and 28%, and I try to compare that with some other YouTubers as well, and I think Shoaib Akhtar talked about it as well, that 40% of his, I think his was 50% was Indian, and 30% was Pakistani, and rest was from other countries. So I think there was another YouTuber, Mubashir Luqman, I think he was also saying that he's got more Indian subscribers than. So that's just because there are more Indians out there. So that's not a downside, and that's fine. I mean, who says Indians are all Hindus?
Yeah, that's the thing. So India generally has around the same, or by some estimates, more Muslims than Pakistan does.
Yeah.
So in Pakistan, it's supposed to be the Islamic State, but in India, the Muslim community, that's a whole different podcast episode that we won't get into here. But I want to talk about, like, right now we're talking about protests, we're talking about activism.
Oh yeah.
What's going on in the U.S., right? So there's a shooting of not a shooting this time. This was basically the murder of a black man named George Floyd. The cop just put the weight of his knee on his neck for close to 9 minutes, and he died as a result. And this is obviously, the protests are not just about him. The protests are about a series of incidents like this that have been caught on video, that have completely incensed the black community, and everybody the vast majority of people are standing in solidarity with them. And the protests, even in this COVID era, were just days before, like literally overnight. Before that, they were telling people not to come out. All the primary elections were canceled and everything. Now you have protesters that are out in the street, and they're using slogans. There's tear gas. There's all kinds of stuff going on. We've just gone from this pandemic story to this protest story. Both of them are extremely important. I'm not diminishing them. So what's your take on this, just in terms of I'll leave it open.
I think I'm more interested in hearing your thoughts on that, because you've been quite active on social media, and you've been getting attacked from both sides. And first of all, Black Lives Matter. I mean, I'm one of those people who have always noticed the difference of how police conducts business in the United States. I'm not very familiar with Canada, but I'm assuming it won't be like America, and so many other places, in so many other variables. United States behaves like a third world country. When you look at European police, when you look at Australian, New Zealand police, and I'm assuming Canada would be very similar to us. There are certain rules of engagement. We don't get an officer pulling someone out of his car and having a tantrum that, how dare you did not call me sir? How dare you, did not call me officer? I mean, I'm one of those people. I've been a member of so many Facebook groups where I watch police brutality videos, and you kind of go in the echo chamber and you see, whoa, is that all it is? My sister, when she went to the United States a couple of years ago, I told her, because I saw her engage an Australian police officer, and I was like, oh, good girl, go give it to him. And but then I told her, just when she went to the United States, I said, don't mess with American police. Just don't. If you run into them, just do whatever they say. And and obviously she's Australian citizen, so she's not an American. So why would you? In a foreign country, we're more careful, and we behave a little bit more anyway. But despite of all of that, so I'm not a fan of police. I'm not one of those people, and it's always annoyed me how African Americans have been treated. Yes, I've heard the other side of the argument too, of more crime and all these socioeconomic statuses and whatnot. Still, there is no doubt how African Americans are treated by the police, and maybe by the mainstream society as well, is horrible, horrendous, and condemnable. I think the protests. So now here I'm gonna get more interesting, and so that was my groundwork that I was laying for what comes next.
I know. Yeah.
So having said all of that, now, and I think protests were good. It created the pressure on the U.S. establishment that, okay, something got to be done. We all remember what happened with. So what was that incident? What was the guy's name? Richard in 91? Was it?
Oh, 91. Yeah, Rodney King. I remember
Rodney King.
I was in high school. Yeah.
So Rodney King's incident. The police officers were released, and lo and behold, and I've seen so many examples where African Americans are treated police brutality, and then the officer is put on a paid leave. So there's something broken there, right? So something's got to be done. Now, they've done protests, they've drawn attention, the whole world is looking, and okay, now that's done. But then there is another element in that where we know that there are organizations like Antifa. Now, I know you're not a fan of Antifa. And
I actually, you were talking about Trump being right. I think he's opportunistic. I think it was a lip surface bullshit. But I agree that Antifa uses terrorist tactics. I mean, their cause may be much more noble, but I don't really see. I mean, using violence, in fact, the Black Lives Matter activists, a lot of these people, they are frustrated with Antifa. With Antifa. Not only Black Lives Matter, but a lot of other groups, these liberal groups who are trying to get something done. They get very frustrated with Antifa for painting them and just joining forces and trying to sort of hijack their message and painting it as a violent thing. Because then what happens is that all of these organizations, they take and the violence by just like the vast majority of cops are good, the vast majority of protesters are peaceful, right? But then
I mean, even with the cops, when I look at American police, I know it's a big country.
There's a systemic. That doesn't mean there isn't a systemic issue. I'm just saying that cops individually, and I have a story to tell about this that I'll tell when you're.
So you can share that. But so having said that, so Antifa is a fascist organization, and when I look at outside countries like India and Pakistan, who don't understand this dynamics as well, and I see that how a great country like United States gets tarnished so easily, and they're talking, see, Americans, they brutalize black people. How dare they give the message of democracy and secularism and free world and free thinking to the rest of the world? And I know that, and again, discrimination is real, and some points make sense in that. But we've seen Antifa putting bricks and baseball bats and everything, and I've seen some footage where people are saying, hey, the real protesters are saying, hey, this is the guy who's trying to instigate violence, and it's being hijacked by Antifa. And I think it's high time that Antifa is actually exposed, and I don't know whether Trump is declared as a terrorist organization. I looked at it. I think there's a lot of miscommunication. This is a perfect way to sell a bullshit product. A fascist organization actually called itself anti-fascist. So a lot of innocent people got involved in that. And when Trump made that tweet, I was looking at soccer moms, as they like to call, teachers, doctors. They're saying, we are all Antifa. We are all Antifa. And now it just this worked for Antifa, where they put out this message, and people who were not so actively sympathetic towards Antifa or didn't care about Antifa first, but because of Antifa is again Black Lives Matter, it's named anti-fascism. I'm a member of that, and
it's confusing. It's like when Trump starts calling out fake news all the time. Like, he's the biggest spreader of fake news himself, but he started, this is fake news. CNN's fake news. The New York Times fake news. But so you're right about this, and this is what the problem is. After all of the looting and the riots and everything started happening, and this stuff started getting magnified, and people were, and a lot of times, I mean, there are videos out there of Black people from Black Lives Matter trying to stop people from looting a store. Every interview you see on TV of the Black Lives Matter activists, they're just saying, please don't do this. This is hurting the cause. Don't do it. Don't loot. Don't get violent. And in most of the videos that you see, most of the footage that you see when people are getting violent, it's this sort of young white Antifa-like people, right? And I don't know exactly what their alignment is, but that's what it is. And I want to quote Noam Chomsky here. Noam Chomsky, who gets more left liberal than Noam Chomsky? Right? The guy's practically just on the edge of leftism, and he said that Antifa is a gift to the far right.
Right? Oh yeah,
and there are so Michael Sherlock, who I absolutely love, is here, and he's saying there are good videos. Yeah, good videos of peaceful BLM Black Lives Matter protesters have been confronting Antifa idiots, and I kind of feel like this year has been a sort of a correction year for some of the really woke-ish left, who, and the wokeness is really like an irrational, completely pseudo-liberal cult, right? The whole wokish, I don't even know why we call them left or liberal, but there has been a correction of it. So for the longest time, oh, am I frozen? Am I skipping?
No, you're fine now.
Oh, can you hear me, Harris?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's been a correction. For the longest time, they were saying that the due process doesn't matter. If someone accuses somebody of sexual assault, you just have to believe them. And the Me Too movement, like the Black Lives Matter movement, is hugely important, because all of this harassment of women, I come from the medical field, I know that this happens. I know I've been hearing it for years, like especially in high-powered fields.
Doctors.
Sorry?
Even doctors, like when I first heard some of these incidents, there was a few doctors in Australia got caught doing these things. And it's like some of the things, like, I mean, even no matter how educated you might think that you are educated, you still don't know until these activists come in front of you and they show you real hard facts. Yeah. And you go, whoa, even doctors, because, in the subcontinent Pakistani mentality, we think doctors are like, whoa, they're just one step below God. We put them high.
It's actually especially doctors and especially these high-powered professions, because supposing, you've been working your ass off your whole life. It takes a lot of work to be a doctor. And then you get a fellowship at Harvard, your dream fellowship. You go there, and while you're in the interview, right, the professor starts flirting with you. Professor, I have a friend who was asked, well, come on, you're reproductive age, you're going to have a baby, you can go on mat leave, why should we take you? And that's illegal for him to say, right? So they do these things because they know, what are you going to do? If you don't comply, if you tell on them, then you've burned your bridges with Harvard. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of things that so this stuff had been going on for a very long time, and it came out and it was very important. Black Lives Matter, it was very important. All these things, the fact that they're here and the fact that they're happening are important. But the correction thing is that when they said, okay, believe all allegations, and then now this whole Joe Biden thing has come out with Tara Reid and their only hope against Trump, and everybody knows it's bullshit. Like everybody knows that that's woman's changed her story 3-4 times, and even if they don't think it's bullshit, they're like, okay, well, we can't be 100% on this. And suddenly they're calling for due process. That's a correction. Before, everybody was talking about Antifa, like you're saying, well, I'm against fascism, so I'm Antifa. And now they're realizing, and people in Black Lives Matter, a lot of them know, they're like, this is completely harming us. Noam Chomsky is saying that they're a gift to the right. And you can see that it's very obvious. So I feel like this there's some level of the pendulum starting to swing back towards equilibrium. It's very early, but yeah. I'm hopeful about that. I
agree. I always thought that this madness that where Antifa has hijacked the word left, the classic liberals. I mean, this is something that we took a lot of pride in explaining ourselves and giving a lot of credit to our amazing advancements that we've had in the whole civilization, not just Western civilization, the classical liberals, and now the liberalism, leftism, that's been hijacked by far left like Antifa. So I always believe that this madness will come to an end at some point, but when it's going to happen? As I said, I mean, is this far left appeasing, Islam appeasing kind of? Islam appeasing is just one tiny element of that.
Mm-hmm.
How far will it go? Because that affects me. I'm not speaking overly about race issues in America, class issues in the United Kingdom or whatnot. I'm specifically, my whole activism is about humanizing or bringing light to the Islamic theology or Islamic civilization. If Antifa gets out of control and this YouTube is pressured by these far leftists that this is spreading Islamophobia, I'm impacted by that. My shop is
I think you have some reason to be optimistic. I mean, not because of YouTube. I mean, I don't know what YouTube's going to do. That I agree with you on. But I think there's some reason to be optimistic that even liberals, especially, and I can speak for the US and I can also speak for Canada, we found out that when it actually comes to votes, no, not talking about tweets, talking about votes.
Tweets matter.
Tweets, yeah. They don't. Tweets do matter, but I'll give you an example, right? Tweets. If you went by tweets, you would think that Bernie Sanders would have the biggest turnout ever, right? But he couldn't even beat. And Joe Biden was absolutely hated online on Twitter, right? When it came to tweets, like people hated Joe Biden. People loved Bernie Sanders. He had the big crowds. Joe Biden barely had 10 people in the room. At the end of the day, Bernie Sanders couldn't even get out enough of his massive support to beat Joe Biden, and Joe Biden essentially trounced him in the primary process. And this wasn't a fixed thing from up above. It was black voters, right, who often tend to be more conservative or more centrist, and actually, in a way, more sensible. They're not affected by the whole the woke thing. I mean, the woke thing is more of a white privilege thing in a way. It was because of older voters, and as younger voters just don't come out to vote, right? So that was one way where you got the reality of it. Second thing is the UK election. Okay, if you read Twitter, everybody thought, oh my God, Jeremy Corbyn's this like huge like leftist hero, Labour. Worst defeat since 1935. The absolute worst. Even like the long
Churchill days.
Even the Labour loyalists, right? They went for Boris Johnson because he appeased him. He started adopting some of the Labour policies because Jeremy Corbyn gone so far left, and he's like, hey, why not adopt some of the more centrist things that they like?
Yeah,
that he's abandoned. So there is when it comes to real life and real people and real voters, we do have reason to be optimistic. The Bernie Sanders, Linda Sarsour appeasing, all of that stuff they're doing. I mean, people they don't talk about it in public. Most people don't, but they know. They have a good sense. of
But the,
what stuff is like.
but real life put Trump in the office. Now, besides that, what's more concerning me now is that now this weekend in Australia, there are going to be tens of thousands of people coming out in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, and they'll be protesting in that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to understand, and it does concern me now. Now, you obviously were strongly believe that, you know, shut down, lockdown, this is important. That's one way to curb it. That's probably the only way to curb it. And Trump's kind of opinion, or conservative opinion, was no, everything's fine, everything's hunky dory. And then we know how Trump.
Yeah, there's been a switch. I know what you mean.
Yeah. So and then he blamed WHO. To some extent, might be right, but doesn't mean that he wasn't wrong in the first place.
It also doesn't mean that the WHO is not important. I mean, they're unfortunately way to their anyway. That's a different thing.
Yeah. So having said that, but these protests, the biggest knock-on effect is going to have all the Australia is a very different country. You know, it's very different from America and Europe in that sense. And again, I tend to think Canada might be very similar to Australia, but in Australia and New Zealand, we're very disciplined in our approach. When the government, even a conservative government, when we, you know, they weren't willing to put country in the lockdown, but ended up doing it. Now, for the 3 months, all the hard work that we've done is going to go down drain. And now these tens of thousands of protesters are going to come out. If 1, 2, 5 people are infected, we're back to ground zero. So, and what are they trying to achieve now? I understand there is an argument to be made that there's been some incidents of police brutality or deaths in custody. Not necessarily. I would still not compare that with the way how blacks are treated in America by American police. And there have been some deaths in Australian prisons, in Australian police custody of Native Australians. And I think the number is somewhere, I don't know, Michael might be aware of that. It's a 400 since 1991, which is a huge number, given the population breakdown. That there's a case to be made in that, but I still feel that this protest is going to be hijacked by these Antifa kind of people. This is a mass coordinated effort in that. I'll tell you a funny story, actually, funny or not, ironic, I'd say. There was an incident 2 days ago. There was an Aboriginal youth who was mouthing off a police officer. And as I said, Australian police, you can get away with a lot. You can drop the F-bombs in front of him. He'll throw an attitude, but there's not going to be any punch on and slamming your head on the ground, none of that. Very rarely it happens unless you've really pushed their buttons. But you can show an attitude, which an American can't even imagine in the wildest imagination. Yeah. So there was this Aboriginal youth who's mouthing off and doing everything, and this rookie police officer, probably not a rookie, 3-year in service, drops him face first on concrete, and straight away he was sacked. And there was this element because of all this, while this is happening in America. So there was fear, and all of a sudden the police chief, the New South Wales police chief, came out and he said, we are aware of what's happening in the world, we've taken action, it's nothing like that, we're not America, blah, blah, blah. So you made your point, you've done well, this is good stuff. And governments, I think, in light of this, they will be watching the police behaviors and they will hold them accountable. And they were concerned that, this might be used as an excuse to spark protests here. But I think that news for some reason didn't, viral videos. Sometimes they go viral, sometimes they don't, even though it was mentioned. That's not being used as as an excuse to come out and protest. But they're doing protests and to show solidarity with George Floyd. So that tells me that this might be a coordinated effort by certain people, and this is going to get hijacked. I read a meme somewhere. It said that I want a new TV. Should I wait until Friday when the protests start?
Yeah, no, I know this stuff happens. I want to share just one experience that I had. I lived in Buffalo. I'm a physician, so I did my residency in pathology and my fellowship in cancer pathology in New York State. And I used to drive to and from work, and I used to be in my scrubs. I used to wear scrubs because that's what we do. And sometimes a white coat, and I'd go straight from the hospital to home, and vice versa. And I would speed sometimes, and there is this unsaid agreement. A lot of physicians are going to be pissed off at me for outing this. There's this unsaid agreement between cops and doctors where they just kind of let you go. Just give you a warning. It's like, oh, your foot's a little heavy on the gas, or what was going on. And like, oh, I just came back from the hospital. I'm going home. If they know you're a physician, they'll go away. There was even an incident once when my ex-wife, my wife at the time, had hit her car, and then she called me, and I was at the hospital, and she's like, listen, I just T-boned a car. I couldn't see the light, the red light. So I crossed it. And so she was in the hospital. She was slightly injured, but she also got a ticket from the cops, and the cops were there. And the moment I walked in, I had come directly from work, and then they told me, they're like, oh, doctor, we're so sorry. We didn't know you were a cop. Otherwise, we wouldn't have given her the ticket. I just can't reverse it now. And I was just staring at him like, what? So there was one incident though, where I had a very close friend of mine, also a physician, not super close, but a good friend of mine, also a physician, Black, African American. And we were riding in my car. We're just driving. But this is in the evening. We're going out for Chinese food. We're both sort of dressed. We're not dressed. It's not obvious that we're physicians. And we get stopped in the evening, right? It's a little dark. On one of the main roads, you get pulled over to the side. One of my headlights was out. It was my car. One of the headlights was out. And he reached in, completely different. Asked him, he's like, what are you doing? Where are you from? Showed the papers, showed the license, registration, flashlight, looked in the trunk, looked in the back of the car. I had one headlight out. They pulled me over because they wanted to tell me to fix the headlight, which is a very, very, very minor thing, by the way. And I had been stopped for that kind of thing before, for the same headlight, and they just let me go. So I'm with this guy, Black guy, physician. He flashes a light in the back seat, right? There's a DVD of an Indian movie that I had, right? Those DVDs you get, like, this is a long time ago,
yeah,
2000s, of with some Bollywood film, okay, that I'd gotten. And he looked at it. He's like, "What's this movie?" I'm like, it's just a Bollywood Indian movie." He opened it up. He's like, "This looks photocopied. This is pirated." And I'm like, "I don't know. The guy just gave it to me." And he's like, "Sir, I need you to get out of the car." We both got out of the car. He frisked me, frisked the other guy. We're both like on the side of the. And I'm like, "What the?" It's like, "What the fuck is going on?" And the guy turned around and he's like, "Oh, this is." His face was just like, "Oh, hasn't happened to you before." He's like, "This is." And I'm like, "No, it hasn't." And we had this. We did end up going for dinner. He did let us go, and we're just we're sitting at dinner. We talked about this the entire evening. I wanted to know about it, and then I found out what happens. That even in the place, and we lived fairly close in the same area, and I was telling him they let me go for speeding tickets, right? And it's a completely different experience now. If I talk to Armin Navabi, and we had this argument, and
it's anecdotal. He'd say anecdotal.
It's anecdotal, but I have to, and this is the example that I gave him. When Rodney King was beaten in 1991, right? You know what that was? That was a huge anecdote. There was because there were no cell phone cameras there. Nobody was watching that stuff before. Nobody was recording it. And before this, so before Rodney King, this probably happened all the time. NWA had written a song called "Fuck the Police," which I love NWA. It was brilliant. Ice-T, the guy who plays a cop on SVU, he had this amazing song called "Cop Killer," and Body Count actually has a new version of it that came out a few years ago. That's amazing. It's a killer song. But anyway, forget about that. That was a big time for this. People were trying to call out this police brutality, and then this thing gets caught on video. And I'll quote Neil deGrasse Tyson. He wrote about this today, and he said that when everybody, and this is the same thing I wrote about in one of my posts recently, is that when everybody saw the Rodney King beating, that grainy video, they were shocked. They thought, like, wow, how these terrible police officers, these assholes, we should fire them. They were completely shocked. And Neil deGrasse Tyson said what many Black people said at the time. He looked at it and he thought, oh, okay, he wasn't shocked. He just thought, oh, I'm glad we finally got one of these on tape. Okay? There was no, if you looked at the stats, there wasn't any. If you looked at the evidence, there wasn't any. And this is one of the things with evidence. Evidence is very, very important. But when there's an ongoing investigation, you can't make conclusions from partial evidence. This is a process that's still ongoing. It's like saying,
I think someone should, there should be a detailed study. I've seen so many, as I said, like I'm a member of these, so many police hating groups. So it always fascinates me that how can a minor traffic stop can actually escalate to a point that you have a dead guy on the street. I mean, it's something you just cannot imagine. So I think all these videos, I don't know, there might be 100,000, a million videos. And for some reason, I always see that there is, there's an overwhelming majority of African Americans who are at the wrong end of the stick in this case. And that also feeds to another stereotype. It says that, oh, Black people cause more trouble. That's why they are always in the video. And you're right in that case, that the attitude of the police is different towards them as well. And it might be a whole circular thing. It might be everything will be feeding another thing. So there should be data available that how many African Americans, what percentage do they make up? Is it 20% or something like that?
It's about, in the US, it's about 11 to 13%.
Okay, so it's 11 to 13%. But then when we look at the prison population, we look at these police brutality videos that are put out on social media, the overwhelming majority, if not 50%, there'll be probably more, would involve African Americans. So something's got to be done, and I think this will shake things up. This I can't breathe. That would probably go down in our time as I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King.
Yeah, so I actually hope it does. It's a weird thing, is people ask me all the time, they're like, you're a brown guy, why are you showing, like, what is so personal for you? Why are you sort of trying to be a savior? I'm like, I'm not, for me, it's not about being a savior. It's just, it's the same thing.
Are we all humans? Can't we show pain and compassion for our fellow humans who might have a different skin color?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's weird. I didn't feel that kind of separation growing up. Like, I know I'm much older than you, like by maybe a decade or more, right? But when I grew up in the 80s, and it's really strange to me, we were just talking about the other day that the biggest TV show was The Cosby Show, right? The biggest sports star was Michael Jordan, the basketball and the Bulls. I mean, that was massive. The biggest the boxer, Muhammad Ali, the
Tyson,
movie star. Yeah, Tyson came a little later. Movie star Eddie Murphy, Chris Tucker, like all of those huge blockbusters, Beverly Hills Cop, and all of those great Eddie Murphy movies coming in America.
Chris Tucker came a little later.
Sorry?
Chris Tucker came a little later. He came in the 90s.
Yeah, but there's and then there was if you look at the music, it was Michael Jackson, it was Prince. I mean, in 1983 was the first time MTV decided to air a Black video, and that was Michael Jackson's Billie Jean. Right? They hadn't done it before.
Really?
Yeah.
Before that, no Blacks were allowed on MTV?
Listen, I grew up during this time. I'm telling you, they didn't show any Black or white couples on TV. Even in the 90s, when they wrote the Pelican Brief, the John Grisham novel, they cast the characters. In the novel, the characters eventually get together and they make out. Like in the movie,
interracial couple was a big problem up until quite recently, and that's why I loved Will Smith. He was like, "No, I'm getting a blonde white girl."
That's the other thing. Like a huge show when I was growing up was The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. The first rap album ever to win a Grammy was DJ Jazzy Jeff and The Fresh Prince. So I've been with Will Smith since Parents Just Don't Understand, that thing that came out in '87. So I was surrounded by it in a way, not in the sense of, okay, civil rights, we need, Black Lives Matter, this and that. I was just surrounded by it as, okay, this is normal. It's like this guy had posters of Michael Jackson and Prince in my room. I had, at the Beverly Hills Cop, was watching every Eddie Murphy movie that came out, secretly listening to Delirious and Raw. My parents weren't there. Pirated tapes. I was in Riyadh. But like, that's the kind of thing I grew up in. So it's not a matter of, so it's weird for me to see. I'm not thinking of these other people, that this other minority that needs to come up and be at this level. I'm thinking of this sort of thing that I grew up with. I'm like, why are these people? Why is everything? It's actually, I feel like it's changed from that time. I feel like it's actually different. There's obviously a lot less racism. You know, Barack Obama was president. It's obviously way better than it was before. But there's something in the dialogue, in the conversation, that's just very palpably different to me. You know, so I don't know what it is, but I do feel strongly about this, because I think that, because I'm hearing so many people saying that there's no evidence that there's racial bias, and I posted links to loads and loads of there's research papers, galore, that talk about how even the size of, they look at the size that their black people are perceived as being larger and more threatening, and they've that perception.
Muhammad Ali said back in the 70s, why is Superman always white? And that's true. All of these things have actually played in our psyche, yeah. Look, I mean, it's just. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
That and when I was looking at, I mean, I'm not a fan of Trump, but there's certain things that just happen, and I'm like, oh, at least he's doing it, because Obama was a massive disappointment. We thought that he's the first African American. Someone who doesn't sound like a Christian nut job. Let's see what he does. But he was just a part of the system. He was no different from Bill Clinton, maybe slightly different from George W. Bush and people before him. Mm-hmm. And this is probably one of the reasons people say that people gave Trump, they elected Trump because they wanted to shake the system. To see, mm-hmm. And even system is so strong that even Trump somehow ended up becoming the part of the system in a way. He hasn't done anything outrageous in terms of.
I agree with the observation, but I kind of disagree a little bit with how you're applying it. But go ahead.
Sure. With Trump, other than the fact that the only shaking of the system is done is just blurt out nonsense things in press conferences and just picking on random fights with journalists. That's the only thing he's done. I mean, he's still friend of Saudi Arabia. He still says all those right things that a president is supposed to say. He's still got the old alliances. Nothing really has changed other than some little shakeups here that, okay, I'm going to cut off funding to WHO. And he sends out a tweet and picks up a fight with Twitter and social media companies, and fight with actual, because and if you look at it, it's because of his mouth. What comes out of his mouth that annoys the liberals and the leftists, and they have also upped the notch on that. I was watching a video, probably a propaganda video, but the facts were there, that how certain things, when the same things come out of Obama's mouth, or not, actually wording's different, when the same actions are taken by Obama, people are like, they ignore it or they let it go. But when the same things are done by Trump, all hell breaks loose. And I understand it's got to do with Trump's personality. It's a very off-putting personality, and
yeah,
I mean,
I think it has to do with more of that.
My question to you is, when Trump said this thing, and I know it has a connotation. I wasn't aware of that, and I looked it up. Then when looting starts, shooting starts, and it has a connotation from the mayor who said this, and there was massacre as a result of that. But had he said it something differently, that we need to restore law and order, how would you say it? So I mean, obviously, you should have someone who says it cosmetically perfect, as we were talking about earlier. How can we allow rioters? I mean, Reuters, however you say it, rioters, I think is probably the right pronunciation. How do we allow? I mean, he called in National Guard. Someone would have done that too. I think when Hurricane Katrina happened, George Bush called National Guard as well, not just for rescue, but also to avoid looting as well.
Yeah, the governors called in the National Guard in the U.S., and that's fine. Right. That's not atypical.
So why? So what is so wrong here? Am I missing something when people say that? Okay, I understand. Oh, so it's been hijacked. People are realizing that it's been hijacked by Antifa, but there are looters in there. The streets of so many cities look like third world countries, war zones.
Mm-hmm.
How a government is supposed to react, or what a president meant to say in that situation.
So,
You've been criticizing him quite heavily, and I've been seeing that you've been getting attacked as well.
yeah, so one of the things that's unique about the U.S. is that there's a big separation between state powers and then federal powers, right? And generally, conservatism holds that the states' rights are more important than. That's why you have the Electoral College. So you're the president of the U.S. isn't always democratically elected, but they're constitutionally elected. So a state like Wyoming, which only has about 500,000 people, will get 2 senators, and then California, which has 40 million people, more than all of Canada, will also get just 2 senators. So what you have is about 18% of senators representing half of the country. So it's very skewed in that sense. So states' rights are very, very big deal there. And usually when it comes to law and order and national security, sorry, not national security, and when it comes to mobilizing any kind of security apparatus, that usually goes down to the governors. So that Trump has always been all about, the governors are not doing a good job. I'm going to mobilize the U.S. military, the federal military, which is something that even his own previous defense secretary, Mattis, came out and slammed him for. So now, you have when Trump gets called out, just a broader point that you're saying, when Trump gets called out for this, it's usually because of the hypocrisy. Okay, so it's usually because, for instance, when he said that the governors are doing a terrible job and I'm going to mobilize federal resources, like overall U.S. resources, to go in and take care of this stuff. When it came to the COVID-19, where over 100,000 people have died in the U.S., he said the exact opposite. He's like, he wasn't going to mobilize federally. He was saying the governors aren't doing enough. Why don't you guys mobilize your resources? I have a national stockpile. It's for the U.S. It's not for you guys. What is the U.S.? It's the states, right? So, so he gets called out for the hypocrisy. Now, another example I'll give you, it's very relatable example, is a border wall, right? When he says build a wall, there should be a wall between Mexico and the U.S. You know who advocated for that? Hillary Clinton wanted to have a border fence. Right, a lot of Democratic people also wanted to say they're like, oh, this illegal immigration is out of control. We have to have a border. But the way they talked about it, so they say that the U.S. is a place of opportunity. Everybody wants to come here, and we wish we could take everybody. There are people who are suffering, and they're running from murderers and risking their lives to come to the U.S. from Honduras and from Cuba and from all these places, and we wish we could take them all in, but we just can't. It's just not economically feasible. Yeah. We can't do that. So we have to have borders. Otherwise, we don't have a country. It's impossible to. And we are going to do a smart system where you apply for asylum, and we're going to look at your process. We're going to have a process. Everybody's going to go through that process. Right? Did she really put all of that in a tweet? No, she didn't. And it wasn't just Hillary. I'm talking about other sort of people too.
Yeah, look,
you have that person talking about a border wall.
Trump says it. That's probably what gets him in trouble.
Well, it's not just the way that he says it, but it's where it comes from. So someone says that, and then someone says there's a caravan that's out to get, and there's some, they're going to come and get the Jews, and there's some ISIS people in there too. But these Mexicans are coming in. They're murderers. They're rapists. They're raping white girls. They're doing all this. When he does that, then he comes from a xenophobic place, right? That is what people don't like. Now, when he's calling out Twitter and he's like, yeah, I'm going to go after Twitter. This is days ago, Mika Brzezinski, you know who Mika Brzezinski is? I don't know if you know. She is on Morning Joe. She's a wife of Joe Scarborough, and she's his co-host. And Joe Scarborough, he's speculating online. The president of the U.S. is speculating online that this guy murdered one of his people, one of the interns who was working, or employees, I don't remember who actually died because of a terrible accident in her office. So, he's saying, well, how did this happen? And he's speculating on Twitter that he was killed. Mika Brzezinski says, she says, Jack, to Twitter, she says, Twitter, you need to take down these tweets because they're actually speculating, and they're accusing, the president is accusing this guy, Joe Scarborough, of murdering somebody. He's making these allegations online. They didn't do anything. Twitter said no. And his son was saying, yeah, Mika now wants to speak to the manager. She wants to restrict free speech. She wants to do this. She wants Twitter to be censored and all this stuff. And then Twitter started regulating him, right? And now he's like, I want to speak to the manager. I think Twitter is not doing the right thing. So there's an element of hypocrisy. It's like the fake news thing, right? I mean, and one last thing, I know I'm going on for a while here, but
I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, one last thing I'm going to say about this is that I don't think policies are a big deal. Honestly, like, policies come and go. Economic policies, you're going to have a little bit of a tax cut here, then you're going to have a tax benefit there, a stimulus package, whatever. Shit happens. Everybody has their own thing. Policies come and go. But,
values.
But rhetoric, the kind of stuff you say, that is the stuff that lasts forever. When Martin Luther King, when he said, I have a dream, that defined the values of an entire generation and many generations to come. Okay, when Thomas Jefferson, when they wrote the Declaration of Independence in the U.S., when they wrote this stuff about free speech and no state establishment of a state religion, I mean, these are ideas, and they're beyond just policies. These were ideals that lasted a very long time, and rhetoric makes a massive, massive difference. I mean, Hitler got all of those people in line. He convinced an entire nation of people to be with him just because of the rhetoric, and that
just shows. And look, and this is a point to be learned by everyone. That this is why I say, and I'm actually thinking about writing a next book, and it's so important that how certain charismatic, influential people go through human history. It's just amazing that why is it that one person manages to mobilize so many people? All he has, or especially in this day and age, and even in the earlier days, even when there was days of conquest or not, you would build an army by using a rhetoric, by selling your words. And throughout human history, it's amazing. We say humans are complicated, but we actually, in some things, we're so simple that someone comes along the way, sells an idea, for whatever reason, and this is why I said there are various variables that play a part in that. That you're charismatic, and you're clever with that. And this is why what fascinated so many people throughout, in last few decades, that how could Adolf Hitler come and convince a democratic society, educated society. We're not talking about some third world African or Asian country. An educated, democratic society. How could he convince them to vote him in? And then we know what happened after World War II. And this is what we're seeing now. What is so charismatic about Trump? His video gets leaked that he grabs women, and fair enough, people talk like that in the private, but you pay a price for it, right? But what is it in his rhetoric that is selling so successfully? And I don't know. I still think I know the last couple of polls were showing that his popularity has taken a plunge, but I'm not sure if Joe Biden is the guy to beat him.
The data, his internal polling and everything, the reason that the Democratic Party and Trump himself is freaked out about Biden, I mean, he didn't get the Ukraine to investigate Bernie Sanders for good reason, is because the U.S. works, the national polls don't really matter. What matters is state polls, especially the swing states. So there's about 15 or 16 states that really decide the outcome of the U.S. election. Another thing, how you're saying that, Obama was slightly different from Clinton, slightly different from Bush, and Trump is not able to do most of what he wants to do. The reason for that is because the U.S., the way it was founded, the president is very weak domestically. He barely has anything he can do. He has to get approval from two houses of Congress, the Senate and the House of Representatives. So it's basically being like the CEO of a company where you have a board and half of the board fucking hates you. Like, they hate your guts, and you have to somehow get everybody to work together. So the U.S. president just historically is very restricted on purpose. When it comes to foreign policy, they're able to do a lot more.
I think democracy in general is like that. The whole concept, even in the parliamentarian governments, prime minister is pretty weak. You have to get it pass through the Parliament and Senates and same everywhere else, which is why it's a better system than dictatorship, where Xi Jinping can just give an order, even though that's more advanced than a downright dictatorship. It's a more authoritarian government probably, but King could just wake up and say, I want to invade that country, or I want to increase my tax from 10% to 50%. A king could do it. Nobody would say anything, but that's how governments work. But hence, my point was that there's something in the system that is unsettling people to a point that they're like, we are done with career politicians, even though these career politicians, you can have a preference, Hillary or Obama or Bill Clinton. You can have those preferences. But my bigger point was the systems we have developed, and I would still say they're better systems, with some shortcomings. They're so strong that even if you can put someone as crazy as Trump to shake the system isn't going anywhere. That was my point.
And it's but I mean, there is a danger for it, and people say, like, and I do have the Trump derangement syndrome, Muhammad derangement syndrome. There's several things. There's a certain type of demagoguery and mass manipulation and assault on critical thinking that I am very allergic to. And they can call it derangement syndrome, but that is a thing that it has in common. I think that the process for me, and we've talked about this before, religion, the most dangerous things about religion, the reason I oppose it is not because it's the terrorism and the killing and everything. That's fine. That's terrible stuff, obviously. But the problem is the assault on critical thinking, the process by which we arrive at the truth, right? Now, and this is one of the reasons, like, when Armin and we completely agree on this when it comes to the reform movement, the Muslim reform, one of the problems we have with it is that it has similar goals to us. Yes, secularism, separation of religion and state, all of that, a place where everybody can speak openly. But the process to it isn't a process that fosters critical thinking and scientific inquiry and honest, like an honest way of getting to the truth. The process is something that says, okay, well, this is a less harmful thing. Here's a less harmful version of the same bullshit. So maybe you can believe this and it'll kind of keep the sheep in order. Not only is that like condescending to the vast majority of people, it's also a terrible way, because if you inculcate that process in people that just believe the less harmful things, you're still making them susceptible to the argument of authority and believing in somebody who's influential or charismatic. And once that influential and charismatic person turns out to be a Muhammad or a Jesus or a Trump or something like that, then they're going to get taken for a ride. They're going to get taken for a ride because they haven't developed that process of critically looking at claims and analyzing them. And that's why I do have my Muhammad derangement syndrome and my Trump derangement syndrome they come from the exact same place.
I think they have their places, but again, the problem sometimes goes. So I wanted to ask you. So the reason why I asked about what should have been done with the protesters and protesters are fine, or looters, but under these circumstances, even excessive protests is not advisable either, especially for someone like you who obviously was in favor of lockdowns. So how do you see the actual protests themselves? I'm sure, fair enough. Actually, I don't know. I'd rather hear you say it. That okay, stop the looting, maybe send in the National Guards or whatnot. But even with protests, okay, point made, people involved have been arrested. Now it's coming to my country. Now this movement, whatever that is, it is. Again, as I said, protests would have been fine. I actually would have joined the protest myself. But this is a COVID environment. Tens of thousands of people are going to start here in Melbourne and Sydney as well. They've already started in Perth. All the hard work we've put in for the last 3 months is gone. How do you support that? I mean, which side? You got to take a side. We can't.
This is where you loop back into what you were saying about online activism. There are ways to do this. The problem with the nature of protests that are ignited by a certain acute event that just is immediately incendiary, right, and provocative in the short term, and just causes people to get angry and get out. you freak out about it and you're concerned about it, yet at the same time, you want to be understanding and sympathetic about it as well. And once the initial thing happens, and then you start talking about, okay, what's a way to do this responsibly? Are we at the stage where in most places, especially in most like developed places, especially in Australia and New Zealand, and to some extent in Canada and some of these countries, the curve is getting flattened, it's coming down. So the worst thing you could do at this point is go outside in a place where you have to yell, because yelling is going to increase the risk of spread, where they're tear gassing people. In the US police, and there's loads of videos of people police is tear gassing just peaceful protesters. Like, they're not even doing anything, they're just saying stuff and they just tear gas them. That is not good, because that's increased sort of aerosol droplets in the air. It's just a recipe for disaster. There's so many things. People are not wearing masks, right? So it's the same thing. If you want to protest, you can organize it, and it's very hard to do. Organize it in a way where you have physical distancing, where everybody's wearing masks, provide masks to protesters, go out, and there's ways you can do it. I mean, ideally, you'd want people to minimize this as much as possible, right? I think if there are any kind of online virtual, I don't know if you can do a Zoom program. I don't know. I don't know.
So I wanted to hear that, because me even being your regular follower and obviously someone who reads a lot what you say, and even for me, I wasn't getting the clear message. Yes, George Floyd will remember, I can't breathe, hashtag, we got to support in all its favor. But under these circumstances, I wanted a clear answer that, okay, well, these protests are not advisable. Okay, they happened in the first couple of days. It was spurred by this random acute event, as you put it out. But now it's done. People involved have been arrested. Let's move on.
Well, I wouldn't say
you do not support these protests. Obviously, nobody supports.
Well, no, I'm not gonna. Well, I wouldn't say stop the protest. It's not up to me to say stop the protest, but
you're not taking part in that.
Now we're at the point, that all of these people have been arrested. There's some of the goals have been met, and there's still a lot to do. They haven't been convicted. A lot of times, these cops have been arrested and they get away with a slap on the wrist. As Michael Sherlock was saying, it's like the Catholic Church. They just basically move these priests to another place for child abuse. But
even Rodney King's one, he was acquitted first.
Yeah.
So we know it's a broken system. We know that. But the trial would take 6 months. So 6 months will be on the streets?
Well, I mean, what you do is, for a lot of people, it'll happen. But now that we're over the acute phase of it, okay, this is the time to, just like we saw, okay, some of these looters, they're not doing the message any good. So you have to control them. And yes, that means if the governors want to bring in the National Guard or whatever kind of security apparatus they want to mobilize according to their state and their circumstances, they can do. Physical distancing measures. There are people who should go out and they should talk about physical distancing. How can you protest? How can you do this?
We know that can't happen. We know that can't happen. It's just not feasible.
Well, it can.
Well, not really. I mean, not really. I mean, we even tried at bars and pubs, and it just doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. So being as realistic as we can under these circumstances, that's it. No more protests. Would you actually be able to say?
That's not going to happen either. That's not going to happen. And I know I wouldn't say no more.
But we also now see, this is the thing. But we also thought that we can't shut down an entire country, but developed countries at least managed to do a lot. And we saw how Italy was shut down. We saw how Spain was shut down. We had limited lockdowns here as well. I mean, streets, roads, empty. We also thought that might not be possible, but we did it and we flattened the curve. Mm-hmm. So we know that the protests that you're saying that social distance is 1.5 meters away, not going to happen. People are going to yell. People are going to do all of these things.
It's not. You also can't stop them. Like this is
no, we can. But see, this is the thing, right? So when we did that, people like you or myself as well would say, "That's it. Stay at home." Mm-hmm. And we give out fines. We give out $10,000 fines to people who come out and break the lockdowns. But here you're saying, well, let's relax that. So would you support the $10,000 fine to every protester who's out there in the street?
That's a good question. And the thing is, no, I wouldn't, because I think that I think both of these issues are real. I think it's a big problem. These protests, I mean, it's a really, I can't conscientiously say that after what happened, and all these protesters who come out and they've spilled out in the streets very organically, that they need to go back, and I'm going to be telling them to stop it because of health reasons. I think that there should be someone saying that, but I think that we should talk about, okay, you want to do these protests? It is your First Amendment right in the U.S. to go out and protest peacefully.
Exactly.
Do it peacefully. Don't get too close to people.
So in that case, my next question is, so how would you say, so you're saying that's the constitutional right to protest, then how would you say those people who were opposing...
I just want to read out Michael Sherlock's point. He's saying Harris makes a good point, and I completely agree with you. This is something that I have thought about a lot. Yeah,
I think I'm about to make another good point. So how would you counter those? So here you're saying it's a constitutional right for them to protest. How would you counter those people who were protesting against lockdowns, and they were saying, "Hey, that's a constitution. It's a constitutional right to be free to move."
Yeah,
and you would have said, but in that case, you would have said, and I did too. I was like, "Who are these idiots? Send them $10,000 fines who are protesting."
Oh no, I said they had the right to. I was like, if they want to go out and protest, they can protest as long as they keep their distance from everybody else.
No, but then we know that that's not possible, and nobody did that. So what happens in that case? $10,000.
I disagree with you on that. So I think that there's a lot of things that have happened during this pandemic are things that we just thought weren't possible. We're going to close down all businesses for 2 months.
We did. No, because we can't keep social distancing when we're protesting. We can't keep social distancing when we're working in a restaurant. That's why we succeeded in that successfully.
That's right, and that's why we did it. We shut everything down because we couldn't achieve, and we did. But we also, it was very, very hard to achieve the idea that, I mean, there's people I know, like restaurant owners, cafe owners. You and I are lucky that we can work from home. We get able to keep our jobs. We're relatively privileged. I think in the kind of works that we do or whatever, that we have basically had it a little easier during this lockdown. But there are loads of people who couldn't make money. They've been, it's
that's what I'm saying. So it's tough for those people, and it's been hard for them, and hence they might be justified in protesting, open the lockdowns. But here we were, us privileged people, saying that no, you stay at home.
No, I think that was a privileged position. I think that there should have been a national lockdown in the US, but I am not going to blame people. I mean, I have a friend in I'm not going to mention her name, but someone I know who runs a cafe, right, in Colorado, and she's relatively well off, but and she's very liberal. But recently, she's been talking about that she's understanding the frustrations that a lot of Republicans, conservatives have with democratic governments and how they treat small businesses. She understood that during this lockdown phase, and there was a big sort of learning curve for a lot of people who went through this, and it's changed the way that they think politically, right?
Did you as well?
Huh?
Did you learn that conservatives might be right at some points, that we have a free,
I've always been. I mean, the reason I voted for Trudeau and not NDP, and the reason I support Biden over Bernie is because of I think the economic stuff that the more conservative economic policies are absolutely on the mark. I think that makes sense, and so I've always been that way. But
joking. Don't take it too hard. I was joking.
The only time that I go total SJW, right, is like this time on this issue, I'm totally SJW. When it comes to like science and all that, I'm totally. There's a few things that I go total SJW on, but economics is not one of them. But so I think that this idea that this is not going to happen or that's not going to happen. I don't blame those people for coming out. I think what was funny about that is that they were coming out to protest. Like that guy made a video that, I can't get a haircut, I can't go to the hair salon. I thought that was hilarious. But if they want to come out and they're protesting, and it was comical. They had their guns out and their AK-47s. And by the way, I think if the Black Lives Matter people came out with AK-47s and guns like those guys did, I don't think anybody would tear gas them. I think it would be super peaceful. And so, I mean, there's a lot of dimensions to this. And
look, I mean, that's the funny side of it. That's the funny side of it. Yeah. Finish your point.
No, but I do think that just like people, when they have to do certain things, when they have to, I think it is absolutely possible at a time, especially now that these protests have turned from just the really initial anger to now a conversation, and it's moved into this phase. I think it's completely possible to get people to do it responsibly, to go out and give them free surgical masks, to make sure that everybody's taking however much care they possibly can. Now, here in the US, by the way, in a lot of places, my sister lives in Texas, she's telling me the bars and everything have been full for ages. Like they've had this stuff open. Outdoor patios and things like that, beaches in California, beaches, even over here in Canada, a lot of things are already open. So, it is possible to go out in groups, and it's possible to do it peacefully. I think there's always a way. But no, I'm not going to hold, if somebody lost their job for 2 months and they're unemployed and they had to pay the rent and the government didn't cancel the rent, or they had to pay their mortgage and that was the
point. Yeah, but that was the point to begin with from conservatives all everywhere who were opposing lockdowns, that this is going to cause unemployment, shut down businesses, people are going to commit suicide and all that. But at that point, my point is, at that point, we were coming from a privileged position and we were saying, hey, sit down, that's fine, we'll work it out, everything's fine.
You had to. Look, the thing is that this has been going on.
Why don't we have to now, when we know that these protests, okay, again, as I said, out of necessity, first couple of days, all officers charged, point taken, there's a momentum. I think this is where the problem is with people who are protesting, that they don't want to let go of the momentum. It's something going to define the future of how race relations work in the United States. And I understand, and this is probably why people are reluctant to let go of this. And I don't blame them. And look, I mean, as I said, if it wasn't a COVID environment, I would have been supporting them. But again, I think now we're going to go in circle. But it's the same point that the other side was making at the same point as well. But we were not willing to listen to them. But now, because we depending on how left you are, they say, oh, okay, because I feel so emotionally about this issue, and rightfully so, you should. Here, I'm going to bend my rules, and I'm going to say, okay, now it's okay. So, I mean, I've heard your point. I've heard your point, and I think fair enough. Look,
I think that, and I'll give you this, that I actually said this before too, that when it comes to this idea of the economy opening up, right? The conservatives did have a good point. They had it a little early on when it wasn't feasible, when everything had to be locked down, right? And that's when we were saying that it has to be locked down, and it had to really be locked down by force at that time. And that really it really helped, because otherwise it would have been a disaster. But
what about now? What's now on protesters?
Well, eventually now, even if the protests weren't happening, right, then you eventually get to a point, right, where you have to weigh the benefits of economy, of reopening, keeping the economy shut down, right, versus keeping people locked down, right? So what happens is that, and this is a false choice. We had Melissa Chen on the Secular Jihadist podcast recently. We were talking about this. It's a false choice, that whether it's economy or whether it's health, because eventually the two overlap. You get to a point where the amount of people that COVID is going to kill or make sick, right, is going to be superseded by the amount of people who are going to die or get sick because they don't have jobs and they don't have cash and they don't have money, and they're suffering because the economy it's completely messed. And you have to make those. It's not a choice. The most difficult choices in life, Harris, as you know, and that's what we're talking about right now, are not the choices between good and bad, but the choices between bad and worse. Right? Like drone strikes. Drone strikes. People, as much SJW as I am, and as much as people think I'm a pacifist, which I'm not. I did go, when I was on the Joe Rogan show, I defended drone strikes. Right?
Yeah.
And he doesn't agree with me. And I told him why I agree with drone strikes in certain circumstances. These are choices that you made, bad versus worse. So I don't, and I will be honest with you, and you know this already when you ask me the question, that I don't have the answer. I don't think any of us do.
Yeah, look, that's fair enough. Again, so the choices that we're making, and goes in the argument of subjective choices and subjective opinions here. That this is why it gets so problematic. And I, as a person, try to take a position as much as possible, because when we start hiding, when we start sitting on a fence, and I'm not accusing you on that. I think we all do it. This is why I said I try to do. I try to avoid it as much as possible, but there's some points you can't. That we have to take a position, and we try to be logically consistent in that. I mean, yeah. I also learned from this experience. I also learned that, as I said to you, not only the fact that financially it didn't impact me, but also the fact that it didn't even make any impact to my lifestyle, because even I had been working from home for a long time.
And we have that too. Like, I've been able to, I work from home typically at least like once a week.
And this is why it was easy for me to say, hey, stay at home. But now we've seen, for the first time in 30 years, Australian economy has gone lockdown, despite of Australia being a very rich country and giving a very generous handout, welfare payments and whatnot. There are families that are suffering, and the Conservatives are now coming. This is what we were saying. On the other hand, third world countries like Pakistan take on a totally different approach. They're saying, yeah, we can't handle the suicides, and if 2% of the population dies out of COVID-19, fine. So they're also choosing between, as you said, bad or worse. My point is, again, so I'll finish up this point, and I think then you can end your point on that. My point was, this is so if we, in our effort to be as logically consistent as we can, I would apply the same criterion on the protest issue, and I would actually say categorically that that's it. You shouldn't be protesting right now. I hated the same Conservative protesters when they came out against lockdown. In Australia, they did that, and they said it's my constitutional right to be free, to be walking free, to have a Barbie. I'm like, geez, man, is that really your biggest concern? But we're like, no, stay at home, because this is going to get worse for everyone. I mean, imagine 5% of the population dies because of this COVID-19. That's going to be worse than your freaking barbecue. And then all other conspiracy theories were coming out of that segment. To me, they're stupid people. That COVID-19 is not even real. It's all a hoax. So that leads to that. But those protesters, I had a position that these protesters should be either given $10,000 fines or forcefully put in their houses. I would apply the same criterion here. Maybe not forcefully, because it's already there's forces.
Yeah, I think your diagnosis and what you point out is absolutely right, and I've been thinking about it too. I just have, I think
you think too much about that race issue. I think that, as I said, that's probably why. Maybe it's because you feel so strongly about it, and it's a good reason to be thinking about it.
I think it's an important issue, and it's come at a time. There is an opportunity. You're right. There's a momentum. There's a chance to do something, and the risks really, really suck. And it's just the U.S. By the way, I do think is a little different than all of the other countries like Australia and Canada and everything. They say living in Canada right now is like having have a nice apartment over a meth lab. People sort of said that to me, because everything that's happened down in the U.S. has just been a complete disaster, and it's with our leaders, at least in Canada, people are getting compensation. People who are hurting are getting some sort of compensation. They're helping them write it out. The Conservative Premier of Ontario, who I disagree with on virtually everything, I have said over and over that he's done a fantastic job. Everything that he's saying, he's talking about reopening the economy. The Liberal Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is completely in line with him. They're both working together to reopen the economy. Of course, there's no way you're ever going to reopen the economy without a risk. But eventually it comes down to with the risk of people dying because of economic reasons, because the economy shut down and all the effects of that, or people dying because of this infection. And when one supersedes the other, then you have to make hard decisions. In the US, the problem is that the political leadership was fighting with the governors and the states, and it just turned into a complete disaster. And most of it was very, very preventable. I mean, all the other countries, they prevented it. They had good pandemic response teams. The US completely bungled the situation. So that's the way that it's happening there is different. But Yeah, I think that that's a really good point. That's something that we should talk about, and everybody should be talking about, especially because COVID-19 affects Black people and minorities in general more and in much worse ways.
Yeah.
Loads of data on that now. It does. It disproportionately affects them. So it's it's a tough question, but I think at the end, I think it is possible to, if you want to continue the protests. If I don't think that you can stop them, and I think that if you do, at least your kid, you build a fence around the swimming pool in the backyard because you have a toddler. You don't want him to fall into the pool, but just in case, build a fence around it.
I think fair enough, and I think if we could infringe upon people's right to movement and put them in a lockdown, if we could do that, if we could justify that, then we can justify telling people not to protest anymore as well. That's my view. But anyway,
Michael Sherlock is saying, I think Harris is right here, and he's also saying that he loves me. I love him too, and I also think you're right. By the way, I think you're right.
But it's just a difficult choice to make. I think it's just I understand your position. It's a difficult choice to make, but but this is why you need to have a heart of Armin Navabi, a very dark heart at some point, and just be a chronic rationalizer.
Oh my God,
that's it. This is it. This is what makes sense, and I'm going to choose that. That's how Armin works. I'm telling you, that guy has this ability.
He has the nicest heart ever. It's not dark. Well, it's dark if dark is beautiful.
Oh no! I didn't mean dark. I was obviously being sarcastic, but my point was his ability to disconnect with our emotions, and he can be very objective. He can be very objective and a very strong tunnel vision, almost like I call him chronic rationalizer, because if it doesn't make sense, that's it. He's out of it.
Yeah, we've had people call him pedantic. We've had them call him autistic. We've had them call him like all kinds of things. So it is.
I think mine's a very good compliment. I'd love to someone say that to me. That have just if it doesn't make sense, drop it, and he will go full on in defending his point of view, and would until the cows come home, and he will argue and argue and argue, give you points after points after point to justify his original opinion. So yeah.
He does. I know. It's I know that. I probably interact with him more than anybody else. Face of the earth right now. So there you go. Final comment from Michael Sherlock. There you go. Saying Ali is thank you, Michael. I'll take that because it's coming from you. And thank you everybody for listening. I mean, this is really good. This is, I guess, the way that we'd talk if we were sitting in that like hotel lobby in Amsterdam till 4 a.m. Man, that was fun. That was great.
I know. It was like a high school getaway while we're in our 30s, or you in your 40s. But like it's kind of school trip in a way that all of us are there, and someone's just organizing, and they've just asked us to be there, and we're there, and it's like, hey, and we're doing silly things in Amsterdam.
No. When this COVID thing is over, then we have to do that again. We have to, because we'll have to fly out there. It was just
it'll be all right. Well, we should be.
I'm gonna have less of gunt.
Right?
That is Australian slang for belly, right?
Yeah. So I think it's Australian.
That out with context. Yeah. So
Michael Sherlock would know a gunt. What is a gunt?
I think he's got something that rhymes with it up here for sure.
It's a gut. So it's a gut which falls over your
Oh, that's brilliant.
That's where it's gut and a cunt.
But it's not officially considered a swear word, is it? Or
no, gunt is not considered a swear word. But if if it gets so if it gets misinterpreted, if you misunderstand the pronunciation, then probably like puck. I didn't say fuck, but I said puck or tuck. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You get the point.
Anyway, man, Harris, this was a blast. It was a lot of fun, and it wasn't the kind of blast that you say Allahu Akbar before, which is the thank you. It was great. Keep doing what you do. I love you, and I love what you do, and I'm really happy you're out there and doing this shit. I mean, this is one of the things. I'm very chilled out now than I was compared to 30 years.
Having said that, you got to be on the show as well. The Urdu one is long overdue. The original one, I lost it. There's so many people. I've only got one little snippet of it, and I think it's had, I don't know, maybe 70, 80,000 views on that one. And people have been asking for Ali Rizvi in Urdu for a very long time. So we gotta organize that.
We're doing okay. So we're gonna do that. We'll organize it. And I also have to say,
yeah, we'll do a live Q&A. So you and I will be sitting and we'll take people to take answers. Anyway, yeah.
All right. Okay, that sounds good. And to Michael Sherlock, we actually had Michael Sherlock on our podcast. We had a lot of technical issues. And Michael, I don't know yet whether we're going to have you on again, because this time it'll be obviously a lot better, but we're trying to salvage what we can, and then we'll keep you up to date on it. Everybody else, this is it. Professional novice. The whole idea of the novice is that it's great to be a novice, because that means you're always learning. It's a good thing to be a lifelong novice, no matter how professional you get. It's great, and that's what we do. We just explore things. It's free-flowing conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. The last episode that we had was with Simi Rahman, a physician in California, LA County Hospital. She is, and we talked about death and dying and how ex-Muslims and atheists deal with that. So do check that out if you haven't already. And this was great, Aris. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
Any excuse you have to hang out and just be on each other's podcast, let's do it. So we'll do the Urdu one next.
Yeah.
See you then. Pakistani Mulhid, everybody. Bye-bye. Allahu Akbar. You can stay on. Oh, wait. I'm not.
We haven't ended it.